Chapter 454. The burgundy silk doo-doo couldn't hide her exquisite figure, slender and elegant. Although it was just a glimpse, to Long Fei-yi, it was an indescribable visual stimulation. Han Yunxi had already pulled up the duvet to cover her entire body, but his gaze was still on her. Where was he looking at? Han Yunxi gritted her teeth and looked at him in embarrassment. Long Fei-yi was also at a loss as to what to do. He didn't expect that there would be a day when he was so muddle-headed. He had come in for so long and even applied medicine for her, but he didn't realize that her clothes were already taken off. The two of them were silent as they looked at each other. However, very soon, Long Fei-yi's gaze started to wander as it slowly moved down from Han Yunxi's face. Han Yunxi noticed this and furrowed her brows even more. She kept glaring at him, but Long Fei didn't notice. His bewilderment only lasted for a moment before his eyes turned even deeper. It was as if he was sizing up his prey as he stared unabashedly at her. The seed of ambiguity had already been planted in the air. Under that scorching gaze, Han Yunxi's heart thumped wildly as it sped up uncontrollably. Gradually, she didn't dare to look at his eyes and gradually lowered her head. The duvet was cold, but her entire body was burning. With her intelligence, she had always been able to control herself and see through others. However, at this moment, she seemed to have lost control. There was no past, no future. She was at a loss of what to do and did not dare to imagine what would happen in the next moment. However, the man in front of her always had everything under control. She didn't know if Long Fei-yi had seen enough, but he actually calmly took out the gauze and said lightly, "Sit properly." Han Yunxi wanted to say that she could do it herself and ask him to leave, but she didn't know why, but she didn't say it. Sit properly. Compared to earlier, Long Fei-yi seemed to be more serious. Han Yunxi curled up, wrapped in the duvet. She just looked at him and didn't move. The method of wrapping a triangular scarf was to wrap several corners around the front of the body and tie it in front of the body. In other words, the doo-doo was a hindrance. It had to be tied tightly under the doo-doo to ensure that the gauze was securely tied. Was this guy going to bandage her wound, or was he going to bully her? Finally, she opened her mouth and said indifferently, "Your Highness, please step back. I'll do it myself." Long Fei immediately asked, "Why?"
Why?
How dare he ask her such a question? Although the two of them were husband and wife, they had never done the deed of husband and wife. They had never taken the first step into the lightning pool. The relationship between them was subtle, and they both had a tacit understanding. At the very least, he hadn't reached the point where he could face her so calmly. Han Yunxi really couldn't understand how Long Fei-yi could be so calm and natural in the face of such a situation. What kind of person did he take her for? So casual? It's not convenient. After all, men and women shouldn't touch each other, Han Yunxi said seriously. Unexpectedly, Long Fei-yi said, "You're this prince's princess consort. What do you mean by shouldn't touch each other?" Han Yunxi was dumbfounded. For a moment, she didn't know how to refute him. She looked at the serious Long Fei-yi and suddenly felt like she was being bullied so badly that she couldn't even protest. It wasn't like this. It wasn't like this between them. However, she also couldn't tell what exactly was going on between them. She had unknowingly fallen in love with him, and he had gradually doted on her. The two of them had walked step by step like this. Until now, they had never confessed or made any promises. They hadn't even been honest with each other about anything. Why did he suddenly, looking at Han Yunxi's embarrassed, wronged, and confused look, Long Fei-yi's lips slightly curved into a helpless smile. He actually liked this woman's weak and helpless look. Seeing Long Fei-yi's smile, Han Yunxi finally got angry. "Long Fei-yi, you're bullying me." This woman would only be so bold and call him by his full name when she was really angry. She was the only one who was allowed to be so audacious. Long Fei-yi became serious. "Sit properly. Your wound needs to be bandaged." Han Yunxi hugged the silk quilt tightly. Her anger hadn't subsided yet. "Get out. I can bandage it myself." Long Fei-yi didn't say anything. He gently tugged at the silk quilt. Han Yunxi immediately pressed his hand down. Long Fei Yi didn't move, and the two of them fell into silence again. After a long time, Long Fei Yi slowly withdrew his hand. He got up and said calmly, "I'll be at the door. Call me if you need help." Han Yunxi should have heaved a sigh of relief, but she didn't know why. Instead, she looked at Long Fei Yi's lonely back view and felt her heart sink. Seeing that he was about to leave, she anxiously shouted, "Hey!" Long Fei Yi looked back and said seriously, "Your wound can't be delayed. Why don't I call Bailey Mingxiang over to help you?" Han Yunxi looked at him for a long time before saying bitterly, "Come over and help me." Long Fei Yi almost couldn't hold back his laughter. He expressionlessly returned to the couch. Just as he sat down, Han Yunxi turned around and put down the silk quilt. How much could a doo-doo cover? Long Fei Yi thought that he could control himself, but the soft and warm jade was right in front of him. His breathing immediately became heavy. His gaze locked onto Han Yunxi's fragrant shoulder and gradually became deep. "Your Highness, the scarf," Han Yunxi said calmly. Long Fei Yi came back to his senses. He carefully covered the wound on Han Yunxi's back with the scarf and walked to the front. Han Yunxi took the corner of the scarf and silently tied it herself.
Soon she was done.
"Your Highness, Chenqia's clothes are on the right. I'll have to trouble you," she said calmly. Long Fei Yi took the clothes and put them on her. Then, he gently hugged her from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder. Han Yunxi was slightly startled. She finally realized that this man was acting strangely. However, she couldn't pinpoint exactly what was strange about him. "Han Yunxi?" he called softly. She responded softly. However, he had nothing to say. He avoided the wound and hugged her for a long time before letting go. Han Yunxi was puzzled. Just as she was about to ask, he had already recovered and asked seriously, "What's with this wound? What's with Su Xiaoyu?" All right, this matter was more important. Han Yunxi shifted her position to make herself more comfortable. She concisely recounted the matter with Su Xiaoyu to Long Fei Yi. The more Long Fei Yi listened, the uglier his expression became. "Damn Tang Li, he had the gall to hide such a big thing from me." Of course, Long Fei Yi didn't lose his temper on the spot. He told Han Yunxi to lie down properly before heading downstairs. Unlike his good mood when he went upstairs, Long Fei Yi was filled with rage as he descended. Zhao Mama saw him and quickly backed away in fright. At the same time, Chu Shifeng, who just found out about Su Xiaoyu, arrived. "This subordinate has neglected his duties. May your Highness mete out punishment." Chu Shifeng knelt in front of the door. "How did you do your job? How could you let a child less than 10 years old sneak in?" Long Fei Yi asked. Han Yunxi had already finished dressing and ran downstairs. She stood silently by the stairs. "This subordinate deserves to die." Chu Shifeng didn't even dare to raise his head. As soon as he heard that esteemed Wang Fei had been injured by Su Xiaoyu, he knew he was done for. He'd been the one who'd sent people to investigate Su Xiaoyu's origins. "Your lordship will give you 5 days. If you can't find the person behind the scenes, do as you see fit. Also, get rid of all the servants and transfer people from the solitary enclosure here." Long Fei Yi said. Zhao Mama panicked at these words and quickly fell to her knees. "Your Highness, have mercy." This old servant. Before she could finish, Long Fei Yi lost his temper. "Zhao Mama, have you spent all these years in the palace for nothing? You're already so old. How could you be played by a little girl?" Zhao Mama trembled and had no words to reply. She really had made a mistake this time. "Chu Shifeng, what are you spacing out for?" Long Fei Yi asked. Chu Shifeng looked at Zhao Mama's pleading eyes and dearly wanted to help, but he couldn't even protect himself. At this moment, Han Yunxi spoke up. "Your Highness, Chenqia has a..." But before she could coax him, Long Fei Yi cut her off cold. "If we had replaced all the servants back then, you wouldn't have been hurt like this. How could the Duke of Qin's estate allow spies to exist so easily? How could they allow their servants to be bribed?" To Long Fei Yi, this was a form of humiliation. With the facts before her eyes, Han Yunxi had no words to refute. She could only plead, "Your Highness." But before she could finish, Long Fei Yi refused. There's no room for discussion. Zhao Mama and Chu Shifeng watched from the sidelines in despair. If even esteemed Wang Fei couldn't help them, then they were doomed to tragedy. Who knew that a shocking scene would occur? Han Yunxi actually walked forward and tugged at Long Fei Yi's hand. She didn't say a word, but Long Fei Yi looked back and waited for her to speak. What was this? Acting spoiled? A honey trap? Whether it was acting spoiled or a honey trap, there was a chance. Zhao Mama and Chu Shifeng exchanged glances, their eyes filled with hope. Your Highness, when Qinxie uncovered Wang Laifu and Su Xiaoyu, I publicly promised that I wouldn't implicate the innocent. Does Your Highness want Qinxie to break her promise to the servants? Han Yunxi said, aggrieved. Now it was Long Fei Yi's turn to be speechless. Han Yunxi seized the chance to give him a way out. Your Highness, please give Qinxie one more chance. Qinxie will definitely tidy up the estate from top to bottom, both inside and out. Han Yunxi's words placed the blame on herself. After all, she was the mistress of the estate and was in charge of all the servants. If Zhao Mama could be tricked by a young girl at her age, then hadn't a smart person like her been tricked as well? As Han Yunxi spoke, she gently swung Long Fei Yi's hand back and forth. It wasn't clear whether it was her words that made Long Fei Yi yield, or her coquettish actions that made him compromise. In any case, Long Fei Yi grabbed her hand and stopped her from moving. Cold, he said, there won't be a next time. Han Yunxi rejoiced and shot looks at Chu Shifeng and Zhao Mama. The two of them were overjoyed and hastily thanked her for her grace. The servants had escaped disaster, but there was no telling what Chu Shifeng would find out. Of course, Tang Li was the most pitiful of them all. Long Fei Yi secretly told Chu Shifeng to send word that Tang Li was to continue guarding the hidden pavilion. Without his orders, Tang Li wasn't allowed to take half a step outside, or face the consequences. Tang Li was so depressed that he almost went back to the Tang clan to get married and have children. Fortunately, Chu Shifeng coaxed him to stop. Chu Shifeng said, "Young Master Tang, are you sure His Highness will spare you if you go back to get married and have children?" Tang Li fell silent. He didn't need Chu Shifeng to urge him to return to the hidden pavilion on his own. It was almost daybreak, but Long Fei Yi didn't go to see Su Xiaoyu. He and Han Yunxi were brewing tea in the courtyard. As long as Su Xiaoyu was still alive, Long Fei Yi wouldn't have to worry about finding out the truth. He could wait until Chu Shifeng finished his investigation. Long Fei Yi also had something else to tell Han Yunxi. To the readers, Momo's updated her short drama. Add Momo's public WeChat account and reply 5 to see the latest short drama. Public WeChat account. Gmomo 2015. Chapter 455. On a summer morning, the air was especially fresh and the temperature was just right. It was comfortable and refreshing. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had just started brewing tea when Bailey Mingxiang and Zhao Mama arrived with refreshments. By now, Bailey Mingxiang had already calmed down and recalled esteemed Wang Fei's birthmark. She deliberately placed the refreshments in front of His Highness Duke of Qin, but he was busy pouring tea and didn't even look at her. She hesitated for a moment, then bowed and said, "Esteemed Wang Fei, Mingxiang is guilty. It's fine. I've already applied the medicine, so it'll be better in a few days." Han Yunxi was someone who held grudges, but she definitely wasn't someone who liked to haggle. "Thank you, esteemed Wang Fei." After Bailey Mingxiang expressed her thanks, she added, "Esteemed Wang Fei, this servant has already applied medicine for you 4 times. If it doesn't work out, I'm afraid I'll have to change it to something else." "All right, you may leave." Han Yunxi didn't want to talk too much about it because she was afraid that Long Fei Yi would force her to lie down. Her wound wasn't infected, so it was only a matter of time before it healed. A few days wouldn't cause any problems. A complicated look flitted through Bailey Mingxiang's eyes before she left with Zhao Mama. Actually, she had said those words on purpose. Her goal was to let His Highness Duke of Qin hear her and let him know that she had applied medicine for esteemed Wang Fei several times and had seen her back several times. She thought that if His Highness Duke of Qin knew that esteemed Wang Fei had a phoenix birthmark on her back and knew where it came from, he would definitely kill her to silence her. Based on His Highness's current reaction, it was likely that he didn't know. However, the cautious and meticulous Bailey Mingxiang still couldn't set her mind at ease. She couldn't be sure if His Highness Duke of Qin didn't know about esteemed Wang Fei's birthmark or if he had seen it, but didn't know where it came from. Although His Highness and the Princess Consort had been married for a long time, their relationship was still delicate. The Princess Consort's chastity sand was still there, so other than the two of them, no one knew if His Highness had seen the Princess Consort's back or not. When His Highness applied the medicine for the Princess Consort, she wasn't present, so she couldn't be certain if His Highness had noticed the birthmark when he applied the medicine. Maybe he didn't see it, or maybe he saw it but didn't know that it was the symbol of the royal family of Western Qin. Bailey Mingxiang knit her brows as she carefully considered this matter. She felt that she had to take advantage of the fact that the Princess Consort's injuries were not completely healed, and she still needed to apply medicine to find a way to clarify this matter. After all, this matter involved a lot of people and was definitely not a small matter. In truth, as a member of the Mermaid clan, she had been loyal to the East Qin Imperial clan for generations. The enemy of the East Qin Imperial clan was the enemy of the Mermaid clan. In the face of such a matter, the most rational thing she could do was to directly inform His Highness, Duke of Qin. Even if she was silenced, she had to tell him the truth. Moreover, she would advise His Highness Duke of Qin not to be soft-hearted and not to be trapped by emotions. However, esteemed Princess Consort was her savior. How could she repay kindness with enmity? However, in her heart, His Highness Duke of Qin was far more important than the East Qin Imperial clan. How could she be so cruel as to make things difficult for His Highness? She really didn't know how to deal with this matter. She only knew that she had to at least clarify the truth of the matter first. In reality, Long Fei Yi really didn't see that birthmark on Han Yunqi's back. When he was applying the medicine, his attention was completely focused on the two ulcers. He didn't even notice that Han Yunqi was wearing a dudu, so how could he have noticed anything else? He carefully sized up Han Yunqi, who was wrapped in a silk quilt, facing him. What could he have seen? Later, when he helped apply the medicine, he paid attention to the wounds and was very careful. How could he have looked below her waist? His Highness Duke of Qin could also turn into a wolf, but in the face of Han Yunqi's injuries, he was very rational. Long Fei Yi had heard everything Bailey Mingxiang had just said. He indifferently said, "Let's observe for another day. If the medicine doesn't work well, then call for the palace's female physicians." In the entire Imperial Academy of Medicine, Long Fei Yi only had eyes for Gu Beiyue. However, how could Gu Beiyue do something like taking off her clothes to examine her? Only a female physician could do it. It's not a problem. I guarantee it'll be fine in a day or two. Han Yunqi was well aware of her own injuries. She hurriedly changed the topic. "Your Highness must be very busy these days, right? Is something the matter?" Long Fei Yi asked. This concubine was thinking that if we really can't find Mute Granny, then I'm afraid we'll have to make a trip to the Mu clan in Medicine City. Han Yunqi had always been concerned about her origins. Mu Yingdong knew nothing about Western Qin, so Long Fei Yi wasn't afraid that Han Yunqi would go look for Mute Granny. Long Fei Yi wanted to bring up the matter of the broomcorn millet poison. If this matter wasn't dealt with quickly, he wouldn't feel at ease. He took out a porcelain bottle from his sleeve and placed it on the table. "Here's what you wanted." Han Yunqi was puzzled. She hadn't asked him for anything before. She opened the bottle and immediately understood what it was. The antidote for the broomcorn millet poison. Bear chuan, panoptic red lotus, and serpent fruit all smelled very strong. She could smell the antidote right away. "I was out of the city a few days ago when I heard that Gu Qisha had obtained the bear chuan. I originally wanted to bring you along, but I was afraid something might happen if I delayed." As Long Fei Yi spoke, he picked up a cup of tea and took a sip, pretending to be casual. This prince couldn't tell if the bear Chuan was real or fake, so I simply asked him to make the antidote for me. From the looks of it, it was real. Growing up in the imperial clan, Long Fei had experienced his fair share of deceit, open struggles, and veiled struggles. A trifling lie was nothing to him, but before this woman, he had to drink tea to hide his guilty conscience. Han Yunxi was a meticulous person, but she definitely wouldn't suspect Long Fei Yi for no reason. She was just curious. Your Highness also knows that you can test the authenticity of the bear Chuan after making the antidote. When I asked Medicine City's Elder Wang to find the antidote, he mentioned that the fake bear Chuan couldn't be mixed with panoptic red lotus and serpent fruit. Long Fei Yi explained. Han Yunxi nodded. That's right. This antidote is real. She should have poured it all out for a thorough inspection, but she trusted Long Fei Yi's work. She was sure of it after smelling it. We won't be able to find him. Just keep this antidote for now, Long Fei Yi said indifferently. A trace of guilt flitted across Han Yunxi's eyes. She casually put the antidote into her sleeve. This antidote was made from 3 rare medicinal ingredients, so its value was self-evident. She had to keep it well. Thus, after putting the antidote into her sleeve, Han Yunxi activated the detoxification system and stored it away. Who knew that the detoxification system would immediately send out a warning the moment the antidote entered? There was a problem with the amount of antidote. The detoxification system's inspection speed was 100 times faster than manual inspection. It immediately determined that the antidote contained quite a bit of invalid powder. Although it didn't affect the antidote's efficacy, smell, or color, it directly affected the amount of antidote. It looked like a bottle of antidote, but it was actually less than half a bottle. Your Highness, you've been tricked by Gu Qi Sha, Han Yunxi said anxiously. Long Fei Yi was shocked. Mute Granny had taken this antidote before, so there was no problem. Could it be that Gu Qi Sha had tampered with it? He had thought through all aspects and racked his brains to come up with this lie. He couldn't allow anything to go wrong. What's the matter? He replied calmly. Cutting corners. At least half of the antidote in this bottle is invalid powder. As Han Yunxi spoke, the detoxification system had already made a precise calculation. Your Highness, this concubine isn't sure of the exact amount of bear Chuan and panoptic red lotus. However, based on the amount of serpent fruit, this concubine should be able to make a full bottle. Han Yunxi took out the antidote bottle again and opened it for Long Fei to see. There's only 70 to 80% left, so it's not even full. Moreover, at least half of this 70 to 80% is useless powder. Your Highness, Gu Qi Sha has tricked you quite a bit. Hearing this, Long Fei Yi felt relieved. If Gu Qi Sha had been purely greedy for this antidote and kept some for himself, then it wouldn't be a big deal. As long as he could hide the truth about Mute Granny, he would be more than happy to give away this small amount of antidote. This was the first time Long Fei Yi had been tricked by someone, but he actually praised someone else. This prince has personally observed him. As expected, his concoction skills are amazing. However, Han Yunxi was already dissatisfied with Gu Qi Sha. The moment she found out about this matter, she became furious. She said disdainfully, he was able to let me see through it so quickly. How can that be considered a skill? Based on the amount of serpent fruit, I know exactly how much antidote can be made. I'll take back every single cent. I won't even give up the leftovers. 3 medicinal ingredients had been concocted according to different proportions. There would always be a little bit of 1 or 2 ingredients left over. According to the rules of the medical industry, if you find someone to make a concoction, you get the leftovers. However, with Gu Qi Sha's actions, Han Yunxi definitely wouldn't let him off lightly. Seeing Han Yunxi's anger, Long Fei Yi didn't bat an eyelid. Your Highness, immediately arrange for this concubine to accompany you to the Medicine Ghost Valley. This concubine wants him to return it and compensate for it. This time, we can't just let him off lightly. Han Yunxi was so angry that she even wanted to put the matter of Su Xiuyu aside for now. Long Fei Yi was more concerned about Su Xiuyu's matter. A complicated look flashed across his eyes, but he quickly agreed. All right, this prince will arrange it. He had received a full bottle of antidote and had given Mute Granny about 20% of it. Although Gu Qixia had kept some for himself, he hadn't taken that much. However, since Han Yunxi had pursued the matter, Long Fei Yi could only attribute the 20% that Mute Granny had taken to Gu Qixia. After all, Gu Qixia was the one who had caused this matter. There was irrefutable evidence that Gu Qixia had mixed the antidote with the antidote. However, the exact amount of the antidote was hard to say. Of course, Gu Qixia was the only one who couldn't say for sure. Long Fei Yi believed that Han Yunxi trusted him. At this moment, Gu Qixia was also waiting for Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi to come looking for him. He had purposely mixed the antidote with the antidote so that Han Yunxi would discover it. Who knew what kind of trap he had set for Long Fei Yi? Long Fei Yi immediately ordered his hidden guards to arrange a carriage. However, at this moment, Su Donglin came over. "Your Highness, Su Xiaoyu wishes to see you." Su Xiaoyu had been stubborn for several days. Could it be that she finally couldn't take it anymore and wanted to compromise? "Then let's see her." Han Yunxi said coldly. Gu Qixia could run away, but the monk couldn't hide from the temple. There was no harm in slowing down a bit. Long Fei Yi naturally followed them. He wasn't in a rush to cause trouble for Su Xiaoyu, but that didn't mean he'd let Su Xiaoyu off so easily. He was planning to wait for Chu Shifeng to finish his investigations before heading over, but if Su Xiaoyu was impatient, he didn't mind taking care of her right now. By the time Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi reached the base of the tree, the guards were about to release Su Xiaoyu from midair. Long Fei Yi walked over and tugged on the rope. One end of the rope helped Su Xiaoyu around the tree trunk, while the other was tied to the base of the tree. Her life was hanging by a thread. As soon as the rope was loosened, Su Xiaoyu would fall straight down from the 5-story tree. The ground below was paved with limestone, so the consequences were obvious. Su Xiaoyu was already alarmed by Long Fei Yi's return. Now that he was holding on to her life's rope, she grew even more terrified. But before she could think, Long Fei Yi actually. Chapter 456. The moment Long Fei Yi got hold of Su Xiaoyu's life rope, he released it without any warning. Su Xiaoyu instantly fell head first as she screamed miserably. The long rope slid rapidly in Long Fei Yi's hands, and soon it would reach the end. Once it reached the end, Su Xiaoyu would fall to the ground. She looked at the limestone floor getting closer and closer to her and was scared out of her wits. She closed her eyes and screamed with all her might. This was the most instinctive reaction. Suddenly approaching death without any warning. Who wouldn't be scared? Suddenly, everything came to an abrupt stop. Su Xiaoyu immediately opened her eyes and fell down rapidly. The huge impact made her head go into a daze, and her ears were ringing. She quickly discovered that her head was less than an inch away from the limestone floor. To be exact, her head almost touched the floor. The frightened Su Xiaoyu couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. So close, so close. If Long Fei Yi had pulled the rope a little slower, her head would have exploded. So close, so close. She had already thought of how to deal with Han Yunxi. She hadn't even competed with Han Yunxi yet. How could she die like this, and in such a terrifying way? She was really scared out of her wits. That hateful Long Fei Yi. How did this fellow come back so quickly? Su Xiaoyu was flustered, but she quickly adjusted herself. So, what if Long Fei Yi came? She wasn't afraid. She had bargaining chips in her hands to negotiate with them. She didn't make a sound and waited for Long Fei Yi to hoist her up. From her current height, she could only see Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi's shoes. How was she going to negotiate with them? Who knew that Long Fei Yi didn't hoist Su Xiaoyu up a little? Instead, he handed the rope to the shadow guard to tie her up. He and Han Yunxi then walked closer. Su Xiaoyu realized that something was wrong and said angrily, "Put me down if you want to talk to me." Su Xiaoyu was tied up and hung upside down. She could only see Long Fei Yi's shoes and not his face. Otherwise, she would understand that no matter how angry she was, it would be futile. Because at this time, Long Fei Yi's face was as cold as a god that could not be offended. Even Han Yunxi did not dare to let Su Xiaoyu down, let alone others. Long Fei Yi walked very close. Su Xiaoyu was very small, not even as long as his legs. She tried hard to look up, but she couldn't see Long Fei Ye's face. It was really stressful. However, she still stubbornly ignored the fear in her heart. She also ignored Long Fei Yi and said coldly to Han Yunxi, "Qin Wang Fei, you didn't kill me because you wanted to pry something out of my mouth. I've also thought it through. Let me go and we can have a good talk." Han Yunxi was about to answer when Long Fei Yi coldly snorted, "You won't have a chance to have a good talk." With these words, Han Yunxi knew that there was no need for her to speak. "I'm not going to talk to you," Su Xiaoyu immediately retorted. Long Fei Yi suddenly pulled on the rope and immediately lifted Su Xiaoyu off the ground. She stopped when she was about the height of a person. Su Xiaoyu thought that Long Fei Yi was going to start questioning her, but who knew that Long Fei Yi would actually order Long Fei Yi coldly, "Someone, set up the pot and boil the water. This prince wants her to have a taste of being scalded." Set up the pot and boil the water? Han Yunxi's heart skipped a beat. She had been thinking about how to poison Su Xiaoyu these days. She had thought of many ruthless but not fatal poisons, but none of them were as ruthless as Long Fei Ye's move. Alright, although it was very cruel, Han Yunxi still felt that it was very satisfying. This stinky girl was so young, but her heart was so vicious. She hurt Bailey Mingxiang and her, so she should have a taste of being scalded. Su Xiaoyu stared at Long Fei Yi in disbelief. Although she did not make a sound, the cold sweat on her forehead had already betrayed her. When she saw Wang Laifu's end, her heart was already scared. She had been thinking about what she should do these days. She was not afraid of death, but she was afraid of this kind of terrifying death. Of course, even if it was like this, even if she was very disappointed after being abandoned by her master, she would never betray her master. Her so-called good talk was just to threaten Han Yunxi. Very quickly, the servants set up a large iron pot at Su Xiaoyu's feet. The iron pot was filled with water, and a fire was lit under the iron pot. Su Xiaoyu was very clear that it was useless to talk to Han Yunxi now. She simply angrily shouted at Long Fei Yi, "Without me, you won't be able to find out anything. If you want to know who sent me here and what I'm here for, let me go immediately." Long Fei Yi was not someone that Su Xiaoyu could threaten. He did not even look at Su Xiaoyu. Instead, he stared at the firewood that was burning brighter and brighter. 2 balls of anger seemed to be burning in his deep eyes. Su Xiaoyu was anxious. "Duke of Qin, if you hurt me in the slightest, I, Su Xiaoyu, will definitely not reveal a single word to you. I will do as I say." Long Fei Yi sneered. If this stinky lass really wanted to confess, she would have done so long ago. She would have revealed the mastermind behind the scenes. At least, she would have said something that could attract his attention. But after shouting for so long, it was all nonsense. If he put Su Xiaoyu down and had a good talk, he would not be able to get anything out of it. Instead, he would be threatened by her. He had seen too many of such tricks. She would not shed tears until she saw the coffin, right? He wanted to see how long she could last. The fire grew bigger and bigger, and the water in the big pot started to bubble. Not long after, it started to boil, and it was so hot that it started to emit smoke. Su Xiaoyu's head was quickly surrounded by hot smoke. She only felt that her scalp was getting hotter and hotter, as if it was steaming. Not long after, her face was drenched in sweat. It was still early in the morning, and the sun would be shining brightly in a while. It was really unimaginable that she would be steaming under the scorching sun. After all, she was still a child. Su Xiaoyu was so uncomfortable that she wanted to cry. But even so, she was still unwilling to reveal any useful information. She shouted, "Qin Wang, if you don't put me down, I really won't say anything." Han Yunxi, don't you think it's strange? Don't you know why I'm trying to get close to you? Don't tell me you think that it's as simple as scalding you. Aren't you curious why I don't just kill you? I have plenty of chances. Humph. Long Fei Yi, I know a secret. You have a secret that you will never be able to guess.
Put me down.
Otherwise, even if I die here, I won't say anything. Su Xiuyu kept shouting, but it was a pity that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were indifferent. After listening to so much nonsense, Han Yunxi also saw through it. This lass kept saying that she wanted to have a good talk, but there was no sincerity at all. At this moment, the large pot of water had reached its boiling point. The hot water splashed in all directions, and white smoke rose into the sky. Su Xiuyu's entire body was enveloped by the hot smoke, and it was so hot that she started to find it hard to breathe. And her entire body, especially her scalp, was already burning hot. If this carried on, her skin would probably rot from the heat. This was even more terrifying than being scalded directly. However, this was far from what Long Fei Yi really wanted to do. He raised his hand, and the shadow guard passed Su Xiaoyu's life rope into his hand. Seeing this, Su Xiaoyu was scared out of her wits. No. Long Fei Yi didn't bother about her. He gently loosened the rope, and Su Xiaoyu suddenly fell.
Ah, ah.
Woo-woo, Su Xiaoyu was scared out of her wits as she cried out loudly. Long Fei Yi stopped, and her crying stopped abruptly. When she realized that she hadn't fallen, she was incomparably glad. But Long Fei abruptly let go.
Ah.
No. Save me, ah. Su Xiaoyu screamed even louder than before. Long Fei Yi grabbed the rope again, and Su Xiaoyu began to sob. She was as pitiful as a child who had lost her mother. She was originally a child, but she never acted like one. At this moment, she was acting like one. Han Yunxi watched and watched. Her original hatred had long disappeared, and her heart was filled with an indescribable pain. Such a small child. What was the point of doing this? Long Fei Yi's expression didn't change. He was as cold as ever and let go again. At this time, Su Xiaoyu was already very close to the surface of the water. The hot water splashed onto her head and face. She finally opened her mouth to beg for mercy. Your Highness, Duke of Qin, I surrender. Please spare me. Spare me. I'm begging you. Your Highness, Duke of Qin, esteemed Wang Fei, I'm begging you. Please spare me. Long Fei held on to the rope. As long as he let go one more time, Su Xiuyu would definitely fall into the boiling water. Her scalp would be the first to enter the water and would definitely be scalded until it had ulcers. This prince doesn't like people who beg for mercy. What do you want to talk about? Just say it. Long Fei finally spoke. If Su Xiuyu didn't explain everything clearly, he definitely wouldn't let her go. Su Xiuyu sobbed for a while before she forced herself to stop crying. I actually don't know anything. Master only told me to burn esteemed Wang Fei first. After that, I'll listen to his arrangements. This was what Su Xiuyu had thought of over the past few days. In the end, if it really didn't work, she would answer Han Yunxi like this. However, she didn't expect that she would answer Long Fei Yi with these words. Who is your master? Long Fei Yi asked. She couldn't tell if he believed her or doubted her. I don't know. I was raised by an old mama since I was a child. 2 years ago, I started receiving training to learn martial arts. Then I was sent here. I've never seen master before. I go to the Tianyuer Inn in the north of the city regularly. Someone will leave a secret missive in the first private room on the second floor. I write down the information here and leave it there as well. Then someone will come and take it away, Su Xiuyu replied. What about that day when you ran into Chu Qingge and Mu Ling are at the inn? Han Yunxi spoke up as well. I don't know them. Master told me to go beg Chu Qingge and make a big deal out of it. It'd be best if I made a scene on the streets. I didn't even make a scene before you came in, Su Xiuyu explained without a second thought. She'd long thought of these excuses. As she spoke, she began to sob again. That's all I know. Hurry and put me down. It's so hot. Han Yunxi was still trying to figure things out when Long Fei Yi said coldly, Do you think your lordship is so easy to trick? If you don't tell the truth, your lordship won't give you a second chance. Your Highness Duke of Qin, sob, everything I said was the truth. I don't dare to lie to you anymore. That's all I know, really. Su Xiuyu cried as she repeated her words. Long Fei Yi's eyes flashed, but he let go. Ah! Su Xiaoyu screamed in fright. Very soon, her head was submerged in the hot water. She was scared out of her wits as she screamed even louder. She only felt her scalp curl up as it began to burn. Her scalp was so hot that it hurt. Still, she stubbornly insisted, "Everything I said was the truth, the absolute truth. I didn't lie to anyone." No means no.
No.
Chu Tianyin must have had his reasons for choosing Su Xiaoyu to infiltrate the Duke of Qin's estate. Although this girl was afraid of pain, she wasn't easy to subdue. Chapter 457. I'm not lying. You're not lying, you're not. You're not. Her stubborn and desolate cries resounded throughout the Duke of Qin's residence. Half of Su Xiaoyu's scalp was burnt, and her head was dizzy. She was relying on her willpower to hold on. She knew that she was about to die, but she still stubbornly defended herself. Even if Master had abandoned her, she couldn't betray Master. Master had raised her for so many years. Without Master, there wouldn't be Su Xiaoyu. She definitely wouldn't be an ungrateful traitor. Long Feiyi watched as he tightened his grip on the rope. Actually, he didn't need to loosen his grip. As long as he kept Su Xiaoyu hanging like this, Su Xiaoyu wouldn't be able to be saved. Han Yunxi and Bailey Mingxiang's injuries were second-degree burns. If they were treated in time, they would recover in 10 days. However, Su Xiaoyu's condition was much more serious than theirs. She basically had third-degree burns, and it might even be fourth-degree burns. In the entire scene, only Long Feiyi was expressionless. He was as cold and cruel as the Azura god. The shadow guards and servants couldn't bear to look at him. Han Yunxi didn't feel relieved at all. Her heart was stifled. Seeing Su Xiaoyu so stubbornly shouting, she admitted that she couldn't be ruthless. After all, Su Xiaoyu wasn't even 10 years old yet. She was still a child. Finally, she couldn't help but say, "Your Highness, in this concubine's opinion, she only knows this much." As soon as she said that, Su Xiaoyu's cries came to an abrupt end. Her forelimbs hung limply, and her eyes were tightly shut. No one knew if she had fainted or died from shock. Her small body was miserably hanging in the billowing hot air. It made one's heart ache. How could such a small child not be afraid of death? She probably really only knew this much. Long Feiyi didn't have much hope in his heart. After being persuaded by Han Yunxi, he gave up. Based on this situation, continuing the interrogation wouldn't yield any results. He handed the rope to the shadow guard and said coldly, "Get rid of it." However, Han Yunxi grabbed the rope. "Your Highness, she's still alive. After all, she's still a child." If Han Yunxi was facing an adult like Wang Laifu, she would definitely not be soft-hearted. Every adult should pay the price for their own choices. However, Su Xiaoyu was still a child, 7 years old. How many people were still ignorant of worldly affairs, nestling in their parents' arms and acting spoiled? Han Yunxi was originally an orphan. She knew the bitterness of maturing early and the pain of forcing herself to grow up. Seeing that Long Feiyi didn't say anything, Han Yunxi continued, "Your Highness, this girl is indeed abominable, but in the end, she was still under someone's orders. Now that she has been scalded like this, it can be considered her punishment. She's still alive. Qin Xia will save her first." At this time, the shadow guards were silently counting down in their hearts. As long as esteemed Wang Fei opened her mouth, she would be able to deal with His Highness Duke of Qin in 3 sentences. She had already spoken 2 sentences, so it was about time. Reality proved that the shadow guards were right. Long Feiyi indifferently said, "You decide." Han Yunxi finally let out a sigh of relief. She hurriedly ordered someone to untie Su Xiaoyu. In order to prevent Su Xiaoyu from going into shock, she forced a life-saving pill into Su Xiaoyu's mouth. Then, she took an emergency shower to lower her temperature. After the treatment, she didn't dare to directly apply medicine on Su Xiaoyu because Su Xiaoyu's injuries were more serious than hers and Bailey Mingxiang's. After a round of examination, Han Yunxi couldn't determine whether Su Xiaoyu's injuries were 3rd or 4th degree burns. There were many types of burns. According to Han Yunxi's understanding, Third-degree burns meant that the entire layer of the skin was injured. Fourth-degree burns not only hurt the entire layer of the skin, but also the fat, muscles, and bones. If it was on the head, it might even hurt the brain. Han Yunxi didn't hesitate and immediately ordered someone to find Gu Beiyue. She and the shadow guards escorted Su Xiaoyu into the room. Long Fei Yi watched as Han Yunxi's hurried figure disappeared through the door. He helplessly shook his head. This was the first time he realized that this woman, who wasn't inferior to him in terms of playing tricks, actually had such a kind side. Although he had always disliked soft-heartedness, he still admired Han Yunxi's actions. Long Fei Yi didn't follow her. Since he couldn't pry anything out of Su Xiaoyu's mouth, he had to think of another method. Han Yunxi put down Su Xiaoyu in the room and immediately began to take care of her hair. She cut off all the parts that could be cut off to cover the wound and prevent infection. When Bailey Mingxiang and Granny Zhao heard the news and rushed over, Su Xiaoyu was already bald. Most of her scalp was reddish-brown, festering, swollen, and even a little black. Her face was purple and blue, and her breathing was very weak. If it wasn't for Han Yunxi feeding her a life-saving pill in time, she would have already died. This lowly girl's bones are still so hard. She should just die and be done with it. Esteemed Wang Fei, why did you save her? Granny Zhao angrily scolded, but her eyes were still red. Her anger was actually because she hated iron for not becoming steel. She had never been lenient with the palace maids and eunuchs in the past, but facing this child that she had spent almost a year with and loved for almost a year, the pain in her heart was so complicated that even she didn't want to understand it. Bailey Mingxiang was silent and didn't make a sound. However, when she saw esteemed Wang Fei preparing the disinfectant, she didn't even think about it and went forward to help. Although Han Yunxi didn't dare to use the ointment carelessly, disinfection was still necessary. At least it would reduce the chance of infection. She only hoped that Gu Beiyue wasn't working in the palace and could quickly come over. Granny Zhao was also silent. Her face was heavy, but she took a silk blanket and gently covered Su Xiaoyu's body, afraid that she would catch a cold. It was said that even a bad child would be blessed by an angel before they grew up. Perhaps it was really like this. Su Xiaoyu was very lucky. Gu Beiyue wasn't working in the palace today and was resting in his residence. When he received the news, he rushed over as quickly as possible. Although they hadn't seen each other for a long time, the tacit understanding between doctors allowed Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue to not exchange a single word of pleasantries. Han Yunxi concisely explained the condition of her injury. Gu Beiyue listened while urgently inspecting the wound. He quickly came to a conclusion. The injury is very serious. I'm afraid it's time for skin grafting, Gu Beiyue said seriously. Hearing this, Bailey Mingxiang and Granny Zhao were dumbfounded. In the eyes of laymen, skin grafting was a very scary thing. However, Han Yunxi was still calm. She had heard of ancient disguises, and in modern times, skin grafting was not a major surgery. However, skin grafting was usually performed on the scalp because the scalp had the best recovery ability. Now that Su Xiaoyu's injury happened to be on the scalp, they could only use the skin on her thighs or buttocks. She didn't know what Gu Beiyue would do under such medical conditions. Of course, Han Yunxi still believed in Gu Beiyue. She was most concerned about the other point. Is it possible for the bones and brain to be damaged? Gu Beiyue's expression was grave. The bones are not damaged. However, with such an injury, the stimulation to the brain, it's hard to say. Han Yunxi didn't tell Gu Beiyue that Su Xiaoyu was severely punished. She only said that Su Xiaoyu was careless and her head fell into boiling water. Since Great Divine Dr. Gu said it's hard to say, Han Yunxi knew in her heart and didn't ask further. Gu Beiyue made some preparations and wrote a few prescriptions for Granny Zhao to catch. Bailey Mingxiang took the initiative to volunteer. I'll go. Bailey Mingxiang's entry into the Duke of Qin's household as a servant was not made public. To outsiders, she only said that she was learning the art of poison from the Duke of Qin's household. Gu Beiyue then noticed that Bailey Mingxiang was also present. He humbly presented the prescription with both hands. Thank you for your trouble. Imperial physician Gu is too polite. Bailey Mingxiang bowed and hurriedly left without delay. After everything was ready, Gu Beiwei began to prepare for the skin grafting surgery. Granny Zhao and Bailey Mingxiang retreated to wait outside the door. Only Han Yunxi stayed behind. Most of the time, Gu Beiwei assisted Han Yunxi. This time it was the opposite. Needless to say, with a beauty by his side, his concentration was not inferior to her at all. Anesthesia, thorough expansion of the entire burn wound, trimming of the granulation, disinfection and cleaning, hemostasis, selection of a new skin, implantation, local suturing, application of medicine, bandaging, and so on. Gu Beiwei didn't say a word throughout the entire process, while Han Yunxi was entranced. This process was similar to modern skin grafting, but the medicine used and some of the techniques were different. She originally thought that Gu Beiwei would take a long time to process, but who knew that his technique was as smooth as flowing water? It was fast and smooth, and there was no pause at all. Han Yunxi couldn't help but say, "Can you slow down a bit? I didn't even see it clearly." Gu Beiwei didn't reply. After everything was done, his slightly serious expression relaxed. Esteemed Wang Fei, saving people can't be slow.
Han
Yunxi nodded very seriously. Gu Beiwei smiled. If esteemed Wang Fei is interested, this official can teach you at any time. Han Yunxi wanted to, but she was really too busy. There were a lot of things to do, and one after another came before she could finish them. When she was in the disaster area, she wanted to train a group of her own shadow guards and teach them the art of poison when she returned to the imperial capital. But now, she didn't have time to do it. She only brought Bailey Mingxiang with her. Fortunately, Bailey Mingxiang's comprehension was high. Otherwise, even if he followed her for 2 or 3 years, he wouldn't learn anything. She said helplessly, "I'll ask you again when I have time. How is this girl's condition? We'll observe her for a day. If the new skin grafts survive, then there shouldn't be any problems. As for esteemed Wang Fei's worries about her brain, let's wait until she wakes up first." Gu Beiwei answered honestly. Therefore, the skin grafting operation was a success, and the nursing work was handed over to Bailey Mingxiang. Because of the delay caused by Su Xiuyu's matter, Han Yunxi temporarily forgot about settling the score with Gu Qisha. Long Feiyi didn't remind her. According to Gu Beiwei's anesthetic dosage, Su Xiuyu should have woken up that night. But who would have thought that she would still be unconscious the next morning? Han Yunxi examined Su Xiuyu. Her breathing and temperature were normal, and her wounds hadn't worsened. She shouldn't be in a coma. Han Yunxi began to feel a little uneasy. In the afternoon, Gu Beiwei came over. When he saw that Su Xiuyu was still unconscious, he frowned but didn't say anything. He carefully examined Su Xiuyu's wounds and confirmed that the new skin grafts had survived. "Esteemed Wang Fei, the wounds are in good condition. If you take good care of them, they won't be infected in 10 days. She should be completely healed within a month." Gu Beiwei said seriously. Han Yunxi nodded. "Then, when will she wake up?" Chapter 458. I'm afraid she's injured her brain. As for the situation, it's hard to say, Gu Beiwei replied honestly. Han Yunxi mused that it was hard to tell if Su Xiuyu's brain nerves had been stimulated or if the blood supply to her brain had been damaged. Even the medical academy elders might not be able to come to a conclusion. All she could do was wait. It wasn't that she had forgotten to settle the score with Gu Qisha, but she had to deal with Su Xiuyu's matter first. Over the next few days, Han Yunxi didn't bring up Gu Qisha at all. Instead, she waited for Su Xiuyu to wake up, but the girl didn't wake up. Long Feiyi didn't leave the estate either. Chu Shifeng didn't find anything according to his previous investigations. Moreover, when he went to the inn Su Xiuyu mentioned, he found it empty long ago. Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei, the other party was very cautious. They didn't leave a single trace behind. Chu Shifeng couldn't help but admire them. Didn't you find anything on Su Xiuyu's body? Long Feiyi asked. We've long searched her house, too. Everything's normal, Han Yunxi intoned. There must be traces left behind. Chu Shifeng, expand the search area and search again. Long Feiyi ordered. Han Yunxi was about to leave when she suddenly said, "Your Highness, let's wait until Su Xiuyu wakes up before we go to Pill Fiend." She hadn't brought up the matter for days, so Long Feiyi assumed she'd let it go.
Who knew she was still thinking about it?
A woman's kindness depended on who she was dealing with. It was impossible for her to be kind to Gu Qisha. Long Feiyi could only nod. What else could he say? Han Yunxi finally left. As soon as she did, Chu Shifeng exclaimed, "Your Highness, this girl didn't sneak into the estate to kill or steal. She even exposed herself and injured esteemed Wang Fei. This is too strange." Long Fei's eyes flickered with a complicated look. After a while, he said, "I'm just afraid she came specifically for her. But why would she hurt someone? It's too strange." Long Fei didn't say it out loud, but Chu Shifeng understood immediately. He had no idea what His Highness and Mute Granny had said in the secret room, but he had an idea of esteemed Wang Fei's status. Su Xiaoyu's strange behavior was most likely directed at esteemed Wang Fei. Even if they couldn't guess why she'd hurt someone, one thing was for certain. Someone had already come knocking on their door. Whether it was the 7 noble families or the poison sect, they had to be on guard. Long Feiyi couldn't figure out one thing. Only the Shadow and Nether clans knew about the exchange of a baby boy for a baby girl in the Western Qin imperial family. Judging from the actions of the white-robed gentleman from the Shadow clan, he either had other motives, or he hadn't confirmed Han Yunxi's identity. As for the Nether clan, there was still no news of them. But those 2 clans wouldn't hurt Han Yunxi like this. Just who was behind Su Xiuyu? Could it be that someone else besides the Nether and Shadow clans knew about the existence of the Imperial Orphan from Western Qin? Of course, even if it wasn't for Han Yunxi, he still wouldn't spare any of the 7 noble families. Years ago, the Great Qin Empire was embroiled in civil war between the 2 imperial clans. After the Western Qin imperial family was destroyed, the East Qin imperial family suffered heavy losses. It was the D clan loyal to Western Qin that started the final battle. They joined forces with the Black and Wind clans to completely destroy East Qin. In the past, the Li clan had held military power and received annual payments from the East Qin army. But at the critical moment, they disbanded their armies and declared their neutrality. Long Feiyi wanted to establish his own imperial clan, but that didn't mean he wouldn't take revenge. He'd spare those cowardly, untrustworthy, and deceitful people so easily. "Has there been any movement from Jun Yixia lately?" Long Feiyi asked. "I heard he's already found a medicine to control the horse plague. The Wang clan's people just infiltrated the 100 Poison sect, so there's no news yet," Chu Shifeng replied honestly. Back then, he and Han Yunxi had suspected Jun Yixia's master and explained that the poison had been caused by the wind. Then he'd asked Medicine City's Wang clan head to send people to infiltrate the 100 Poison sect. It'd be difficult for his men to sneak in, but the Wang clan's pharmacists had the advantage. The 100 Poison sect still relied on Medicine City for its medicinal plants. "It's best to be cautious. Don't beat the grass and startle the snake," Long Fei instructed. He flipped open the annals of the 7 noble families, which he hadn't touched for a long time, and flipped to the page about the Wind clan. It read, "Wind clan, well versed in astronomy and geography, divination and divination. Skilled at controlling the wind and using it to lay out traps, set up traps, and march troops." Long Fei read each word carefully while tapping his fingers on the table. He seemed to be pondering something. Currently, Jun Yixia and Bai Qingyan were far away in northern Li, studying Bailey Mingxiang's blood. Jun Yixia couldn't figure it out, so he could only hand it over to Bai Qingyan. "It's strange. This blood contains a high level of poison, but people can still survive," Bai Qingyan said as he licked the blood lightly. As Bai Qingyan spoke, he licked the blood. No one knew what he tasted, but his face was filled with doubt. "It doesn't taste like human blood. Even fish blood shouldn't be this bad. If it was fish blood, I would have known long ago that the fish were poisoned," Jun Yixia said seriously. Bai Qingyan didn't say anything and continued to lick the blood. Jun Yixia hesitated for a moment, then said in a low voice, "Master, could it be the goo cultivation technique?" Long Fei is cultivating human goo. Human nurturing goo used poison to nurture humans, creating an immortal body that was impervious to all poisons. It doesn't seem like it. At the very least, he wouldn't use a slow-acting poison like this. Bai Qingyan said as he put the blood away in his sleeve. I'll keep it for now. I'll study it slowly. Jun Yixia really didn't want to part with the blood. He wanted to study it too, but since his master had already taken it, what else could he say? Have you found anything about the horse plague? Bai Qingyan asked. There's no evidence yet to prove that it was man-made. The plague is under control, but it's a pity that the cavalry suffered a great loss this time. This was the most depressing thing for Jun Yixia. It was because of this plague that he had been suppressed on Yuzhou Island for so long. Horses are the lifeblood of Northern Li. Before I left, I reminded you that you must take down the 3 major horse farms. After so many years, you've only taken down Tianzhe Horse Farm. What do you want me to say? Bai Qingyan reprimanded unhappily. Jun Yixia had always been arrogant, but in front of his master, he was very obedient. He lowered his head. This disciple knows his mistake. Use this opportunity to take down Nanjun Horse Farm and Hongcheng Horse Farm. Before you take down these 2 horse farms, you're not allowed to leave Northern Li. Bai Qingyan ordered sternly. Jun Yixia didn't have any objections. Yes, this disciple understands. Bai Qingyan stood up and left. He didn't let Jun Yixia see him off. He didn't reveal his whereabouts when he came to Northern Li. He had been staying in Linjiang Courtyard in Prince Kang's Kong Mansion this entire time. Even the Northern Dynasty's emperors didn't know about this. When he arrived at Linjiang Courtyard, Bai Qingyan immediately took a bloody saliva from the tip of his tongue and placed it in a porcelain dish. He then added several drops of medicine. Who would have thought that the red blood would gradually change until it turned black? It emitted a very strange fishy smell. It wasn't greasy, but rather faint, like the smell of the sea breeze. Bai Yanqing set the black blood on fire, causing it to emit white smoke. He closed his eyes and took a whiff, enjoying it as much as smoking a cigarette. After all, the smoke was filled with the poison from the blood, but Bai Qingyan wasn't afraid. Even if he breathed in all of it, he wouldn't be poisoned. This kind of poison was child's play to him. When the black color burned out, the blood returned to its bright red color. Bai Qingyan slowly opened his eyes and looked at the dazzling red in the porcelain dish. His eyes seemed to have been dyed red as well. He was silent for a long time before he sneered. It's the blood of a mermaid. When did the mermaids return to the surface? Humph. It wasn't clear whether Bai Qingyan was intentionally hiding this from Jun Yixia. In any case, Jun Yixia didn't know about this matter. He obeyed Bai Qingyan almost unconditionally. No matter how much he hated Long Fei and Han Yunqi, he still convinced himself to calm down and take care of Northern Li's internal affairs for the time being. Several days passed. Long Fei still hadn't found any clues about Su Xiaoyu's things. Su Xiaoyu was still unconscious. Gu Beiwei came for another routine examination. Long Fei also came for the first time. Long Fei sat to the side without saying a word. After Gu Beiwei bowed, he continued the examination as if there was no one else around. It seemed as if nothing had happened between the two of them, but in reality, only they knew. How is it? Han Yunqi asked. The longer this girl was unconscious, the worse the situation was. Gu Beiwei helplessly shook his head. Long Fei finally looked over. Even Imperial Physician Gu is helpless? This humble subject's abilities are limited. Please forgive me, Your Highness, Gu Beiwei said modestly. You were able to pull this prince back from the clutches of the King of Hell. This prince believes in your medical skills, Long Fei said. Your Highness trusts this humble subject so much. Gu Beiwei's attitude remained the same. Han Yunqi stood to the side. She felt that the atmosphere between the two of them was strange. In any case, she didn't dare to speak. Su Xiaoyu's scalp injury had almost healed. She was thinking that if Su Xiaoyu still didn't wake up, she would hand over the care to Bailey Mingxiang. She still had to make a trip to the Medicine Ghost Valley. All right, she had been thinking about this matter the entire time. She hadn't forgotten about it. Moreover, she had been thinking about how to compensate Gu Qixia for the past few days. Long Feiyi was halfway through his sentence when Bailey Mingxiang, who was guarding the bed, suddenly exclaimed, "Esteemed Princess Consort, she's moving." As soon as he said this, Gu Beiwei and Han Yunqi both rushed to the bed. Their synchronized movements and speed were truly in sync. Long Feiyi was dazzled. "Where did she move?" Gu Beiwei asked. "Her eyes." "She just opened her eyes." Bailey Mingxiang was very excited. She had been guarding Su Xiaoyu most of the time these past few days. Although she didn't like this girl, she still carefully guarded her. Gu Beiwei immediately checked Su Xiaoyu's eyes, who knew that as soon as he opened her eyes, she would suddenly forcefully slap away Gu Beiwei's hand and open her eyes on her own. "She's awake." Everyone was overjoyed. Only Long Feiyi sat there expressionlessly. It was good that this girl was awake. If they couldn't find any clues, they would have to continue investigating her. Who knew that Su Xiaoyu's first words would cause Long Feiyi's expression to change? Su Xiaoyu looked at everyone and muttered, "Who are you?" Everyone was shocked, but Gu Beiwei was very calm. You don't remember us?" Su Xiaoyu shook her head and asked, "Where is this place?" "Stupid girl. You lost your memories?" Han Yunqi was shocked and angry. Su Xiaoyu looked up at her.
Who are you?
Chapter 459. Who is she? Han Yunqi found this funny and angry at the same time. This stinky girl was actually asking who she was? It had to be said, losing one's memory was a helpless and hateful thing. A person with memory loss would forget everything irresponsibly, but a person with memory loss would forever remember everything. This was too unfair. Han Yunqi looked at Gu Beiwei, and Gu Beiwei helplessly shook his head. Seeing Gu Beiwei's expression, Han Yunqi knew that Su Xiaoyu was not faking it. They were worried that this girl would hurt her brain, but losing her memory was a surprise. However, losing her memory was better than being in a coma for the rest of her life. Long Feiyi walked over to look at Su Xiaoyu, and then immediately looked at Gu Beiwei with a questioning gaze. Gu Beiwei seriously nodded and confirmed to Long Feiyi that this memory loss was real. Seeing the silent and surprised faces of everyone, Su Xiaoyu was also very confused. Although she had lost her memory, her nature had not changed. She was still young and her tone was not good. She asked Han Yunqi, "Who are you? Why are you calling me a stinky girl? How am I stinky?" This. Han Yunqi rolled up her sleeves in interest and prepared to teach her a lesson, but who would have thought that Bailey Mingxiang would speak first? "Xiaoyu, don't be unreasonable. She is the Princess Consort, your life savior. Have you forgotten?" Life savior. Su Xiaoyu was even more confused. She looked down at herself and saw that she was perfectly fine. "You were an orphan and were seriously injured by the scalding. It was the Princess Consort who saved you. Without the Princess Consort, you would have died long ago," Bailey Mingxiang seriously explained. Everyone present was surprised by Bailey Mingxiang's explanation. However, Bailey Mingxiang was not lying. Han Yunqi was indeed Su Xiaoyu's savior. If Han Yunqi had not been soft-hearted, this brat would have been cooked alive. Scalded, Su Xiaoyu was doubtful as she checked herself. Inadvertently, she touched her head and touched the gauze. Her hands immediately retracted as if she had been electrocuted. Only then did she notice the strangeness of the top of her head. She felt that her scalp was heavy and tight. "See for yourself." Granny Zhao angrily brought over a mirror. When Su Xiaoyu saw it, she immediately shouted, "My hair? Where's my hair?" At this moment, she looked like a little nun. Her bald head was wrapped in a layer of white gauze. Her features were delicate and young, but her expression was mature beyond her age. "Your scalp is damaged. How can you still have hair?" Granny Zhao unhappily retorted. "Who scalded me?" Su Xiaoyu was very fierce. When these words came out, the crowd fell silent. Bailey Mingxiang and Granny Zhao did not dare to look at His Highness Duke of Qin. They could not imagine his current expression. However, Han Yunqi looked at Long Feiyi with smiling eyes. She almost laughed out loud. Han Yunxi was amused. What else could Long Feiyi do? He continued to maintain his cold expression and did not say anything. You scalded yourself by accident. Fortunately, we managed to save you in time. Once your scalp recovers, your hair will grow back. Don't worry. Han Yunxi replied. She mused that this girl's amnesia could be considered a new life. Once she recovered, she would send her away. She still had a long future ahead of her. Unexpectedly, Su Xiuyu looked at her and suddenly became serious. She said word by word, "Then I'll follow you for the rest of my life. If anyone dares to bully you, I'll burn them to death." His tender little face revealed an evil expression like a little devil's. His pair of big watery eyes were filled with seriousness and persistence. The adults present were all shocked and could not treat these words as a child's joke. Because this was a promise. A strange feeling flowed through Han Yunxi's heart. She had saved many people in both her previous and current life, and was not lacking in gratitude. However, she had never heard such a tender and serious voice. Originally, she really did not want to keep her, but after hearing these words, she mysteriously liked this little devil. Really? Han Yunxi asked seriously. If I lie to you, I'll die right here. Su Xiaoyu replied without thinking. Stinky girl, can't you speak properly? You're so young and your words are so vicious. You'll have to come back in the future. Zhao Mama could not help but reprimand. Heaven knows what kind of personality this stinky girl had previously. She must have been extremely, extremely bad. However, Han Yunxi liked her very much. If it was said that she had stirred up her feelings a little earlier, then now she really wanted to keep this girl. All right, you'll follow me in the future. If you dare to have any disloyalty, as Han Yunxi spoke, the corners of her mouth curled into a dangerous and evil smile. She slowly leaned forward and said softly, I'll poison you to death. Su Xiuyu was stunned, but then she put on a proud expression. I'll never do that. Before Gu Beiwa left, Han Yunxi asked in a low voice, Is this girl all right? If this official's diagnosis is correct, there's a blockage in her brain. I'm afraid she won't be able to recover in this lifetime. Gu Beiwa said indifferently. Since Gu Beiwa had already said so, Han Yunxi was at ease. However, Long Feiyi was not at ease. After the incident, he found no less than 10 divine doctors to diagnose Su Xiuyu. Every doctor's conclusion was the same. This girl had been frightened and her brain had been damaged. He was afraid that she would not be able to recover in this lifetime. Of course, this was a story for another day. Just like that, Su Xiaoyu continued to stay in the Duke of Qin's estate. That day, she could not sit still in her room. She actually dared to leave her room with a big bald head and strolled around the courtyard. She looked at Zhao Mama and shook her head repeatedly. Mingxiang, do you bear a grudge against this girl? Zhao Mama asked. Even esteemed Wang Fei doesn't bear a grudge. Why would Mingxiang bear a grudge against a child? Bailey Mingxiang smiled faintly. Zhao Mama was even gratified. She sighed and said, Even the child has forgotten those things. Let's forget them as well. Bailey Mingxiang did not reply. She had been silently searching for Su Xiuyu these past few days, hoping to find traces of her in the leisurely cloud pavilion. Su Xiuyu had lost her memory, but the person behind her was definitely still watching esteemed Wang Fei. After dealing with Su Xiuyu's matter, the first thing Han Yunxi said to Long Feiyi was, Let's go to the Medicine Ghost Valley immediately. We've been delayed for so many days. I want to collect interest from Gu Qisha. The corner of Long Feiyi's mouth twitched slightly. The injury on your back hasn't healed yet. It's fine. I'll be fine after 2 more treatments. What could be more important than getting even with Gu Qisha? Han Yunxi had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. Although Han Yunxi only needed to say a few nice words, act coquettishly, or act cute to win over this cold-faced duke, she couldn't win over him when it came to her personal matters. Long Feiyi said indifferently, Then we'll go after 2 more treatments. Your Highness, we already agreed to go immediately. Han Yunxi said seriously. If it weren't for the delay caused by Su Xiuyu's matter, they would already be in the Medicine Ghost Valley. At that time, Long Fei's mind was filled with the matter of the antidote, so he had indeed agreed, without thinking. But now, he asked in return, didn't you not go immediately?
You,
The sharp-tongued Han Yunshi suddenly didn't know how to answer him. We'll go once your injury is healed. This prince won't go back on his word. Long Fei said seriously. It seemed like he had already gone back on his word, but that wasn't the case. Han Yunshi didn't say anything and just looked at him pitifully. Ahem. Long Fei coughed lightly and avoided her lovely gaze. Go and rest. Han Yunshi was about to walk in front of Long Fei and use her gaze to conquer him, but Long Fei was one step ahead of her and walked away. Your Highness, Han Yunshi called out gently, but a certain someone pretended not to hear her. Fine, she gave up. She had goosebumps all over her body when she was gentle, not to mention when she was coquettish. She thought that if she acted coquettishly in front of him one day, he would definitely run away even faster. It was better to rely on oneself than on others. Han Yunshi decided to go back to Leisurely Cloud Pavilion and lie down for a day. She didn't believe that her injury wouldn't heal after a day of drying. In reality, Long Fei hadn't gone far. He was standing inside the courtyard's arched door, leaning against the wall. The expression on his ice-cold face was extremely strange, like an indescribable color palette. He only walked out after confirming that Han Yunshi had left. Han Yunshi's wound had already scabbed over, but Long Fei had treated it again. She had recovered very well today, and was basically fine. It was just that the area where Bailey Mingxiang had accidentally injured her had just scabbed over, so she had to be careful. She found Bailey Mingxiang to apply the medicine. Bailey Mingxiang was about to persuade her, but she said self-consciously, there's no need to bandage it. Just leave it like this, and it'll heal faster. Bailey Mingxiang was overjoyed. Her gaze swept over Han Yunshi's waist and saw the faint phoenix birthmark under the silk quilt, only revealing a little. Bailey Mingxiang knew that this was an opportunity. She had to think of a way to get His Highness Duke of Qin to come over. Go and get the poison manual. Han Yunshi was flustered. She hadn't made any progress with the perplexing butterfly illusion, so she was too lazy to let her mind wander around the detox system. Actually, she suspected that the perplexing butterfly illusion could be solved because there were too few clues. She thought that Long Fei would be anxious about this matter, but judging from his attitude, he didn't seem to be in a hurry at all. His heart was so big, and his world was so big. Why hadn't he made any big moves yet? After using the disaster relief to seize control of Tianning's 3 great prefectures, he hadn't made any moves either. Wasn't he anxious? He was busy all day, but what else could he be busy with? Actually, Han Yunshi longed to be a soldier on horseback and conquer the world. She hoped that her poison skills would improve and that she could learn martial arts and tactics so that she could fight side by side with Long Fei and carve out a new world for herself. By the time Bailey Mingxiang brought over the poison manual, Han Yunshi had already fallen asleep. Bailey Mingxiang quickly and carefully draped a silk blanket over her waist, afraid that she'd catch a cold. After keeping watch for a while, Bailey Mingxiang couldn't sit still any longer. Her hesitation was written all over her face, and she rubbed her fingers together for a long time before she finally made up her mind. Esteemed Wang Fei's injuries were almost healed. If she didn't take this chance to figure out His Highness Duke of Qin's stance, she might not have another chance in the future. She resolutely got up and went downstairs to find Zhao Mama. Mama, I have urgent matters to discuss with His Highness. Even in the Duke of Qin's estate, it wasn't easy to find His Highness Duke of Qin. At the very least, Bailey Mingxiang didn't know how to find him, nor did she dare to approach that mysterious sleeping quarters. What's wrong? Zhao Mama was puzzled. Bailey Mingxiang had never sought out His Highness since entering the estate. Esteemed Wang Fei's injuries on her back are a bit troublesome. She's also asleep, so I didn't dare make a decision on my own. I wanted to ask His Highness for advice, Bailey Mingxiang replied. What's wrong? Is it suppurating? Zhao Mama was anxious. That's not it. It's just a matter of using medicine. Zhao Mama, can you find His Highness and bring him here? I have to stand guard over esteemed Wang Fei, Bailey Mingxiang said. Zhao Mama didn't dare delay and immediately went to find. Chapter 460. After seeing Zhao Mama leave, Bailey Mingxiang immediately returned to her loft. Her heart was already beating very fast, and she was panting from the rush of walking up the stairs. She adjusted herself at the door for a long time before entering the room. She wasn't worried that esteemed Wang Fei would suddenly wake up. Since she had already done so, she must have a plan. What she was nervous about was that she still had to face His Highness Duke of Qin. She waited outside the door, her heart jumping up and down. She was so flustered that she almost couldn't breathe. She had never done anything that made her feel guilty in her life. She was worried that she wouldn't be able to keep up the act in front of His Highness. All right, she had forgotten that she had always been acting in front of His Highness Duke of Qin. She clearly liked him very much, but she pretended that she didn't admire him at all. She was purely a respectful subordinate. Long Fei Yi soon arrived. Knowing that Han Yunxi was asleep, his footsteps lightened. What happened? Bailey Mingxiang bowed as she replied in a low voice. The wound on esteemed Wang Fei's back is quite serious. This concubine was afraid that it would leave a scar, so this concubine didn't dare use medicine casually. Seeing that esteemed Wang Fei was sleeping soundly, this concubine couldn't bear to disturb her. As a result, this concubine could only ask Your Highness. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything else before entering the room. Bailey Mingxiang let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly followed him in. Han Yunxi was still lying on the bed with only her doo-doo on. She was very cool, lying on her stomach. The dark silk quilt only covered half her waist. From a distance, her snow-white skin was faintly discernible under the red canopy. There was an indescribable feeling of ambiguity. Long Fei Yi walked closer and immediately noticed that Han Yunxi's doo-doo was different from before. Today's doo-doo was a light white. Compared to the wine-red one from before, it was less sexy and more pure. He even noticed that the straps of this doo-doo were thinner than before. Alright, his eyesight had always been very good. He could basically see through a person with a single glance, let alone a doo-doo. Of course, he also saw that her 2 ulcers were almost completely healed. He stared at it for a long time, remaining silent for a long time. Bailey Mingxiang, who had been waiting by the side, saw everything. Although she was a virgin and had never experienced the affairs between men and women, she could still understand the depth in His Highness's eyes that was unique to men. Bailey Mingxiang's heart sank bit by bit. He almost couldn't hold it in any longer. When she came to the Duke of Qin's manor, she never thought that she would encounter so many things. She only wanted to repay her debt of gratitude. She told herself time and time again not to look too much. But who would have thought that she would lure His Highness Duke of Qin here? Your Highness. Bailey Mingxiang finally spoke. Long Fei Yi finally regained his senses. He sat on the edge of the bed. Han Yunxi was sleeping with her face turned to the side. Perhaps she was too tired, but she was indeed sleeping soundly. Where? Long Fei Yi asked in a low voice. Bailey Mingxiang took a deep breath before walking over. In front of Long Fei Yi, she pretended to casually pull down the silk quilt. This time, Han Yunxi's entire back was exposed. Bailey Mingxiang didn't immediately point out the location of the wound. Instead, she pulled back the silk quilt and casually placed it to the side. This way, she had some time. It was during this time that Long Fei Yi's hunter's gaze swept over Han Yunxi's back. As if admiring an authentic piece of art, he looked from her shoulder blades down, along the curve of her jade back, all the way down to her buttocks. It was also at this time that Long Fei Yi saw for the first time a light red mark below Han Yunxi's waist. It was just a glance, but when he saw this light red mark, he seriously turned his head to look at it. He found that this faint birthmark was like the wings of a phoenix spreading its wings. He didn't know the meaning of this phoenix feather, but he was curious. He reached out his hand and gently stroked it, not avoiding Bailey Mingxiang's presence at all. This pair of hands that held the sword were stained with countless amounts of blood. How cruel and cold were they? How could they make such gentle movements? Bailey Mingxiang's heart almost melted when she saw this. She felt like she was in a dream. She finally understood that His Highness didn't know about the existence of this birthmark before. With his current reaction, he probably didn't know about this birthmark either. Bailey Mingxiang looked away and secretly let out a sigh of relief. She felt like the large stone that had been pressing down on her heart for several days had finally been lifted. Since His Highness didn't know, then she definitely wouldn't betray the Princess Consort. She didn't hesitate at all and decided to let this secret rot in her heart. Perhaps it was because she felt the movement behind her, but the sleeping Han Yunxi wanted to turn over. Long Fei Yi immediately let go, but it was too late. Han Yunxi had already turned over and was about to lie down. Her back hadn't healed yet and medicine had just been applied, so she couldn't lie down. It had to be known that these past few days, if it wasn't Bailey Mingxiang, then it was Granny Zhao. They were afraid that she would fall asleep and move her wound when she turned over. Bailey Mingxiang was very anxious, but Long Fei Yi held her back and stopped her. Han Yunxi didn't wake up. It wasn't that she slept like a dead pig, but rather that she was used to it. These past few days, she would often turn over at night. Granny Zhao and Bailey Mingxiang would hold her up with a pillow, or they would forcefully turn her over so she could continue lying down. In the beginning, she would wake up, but after a few times, she got used to it. She trusted them and slept without worry. After stabilizing Han Yunxi, Long Fei Yi carefully turned her over and continued lying down. Seeing that Han Yunxi didn't wake up and continued sleeping, Long Fei Yi couldn't help smiling. He helplessly gave a bitter smile. He was smiling. This was the first time Bailey Mingxiang knew that His Highness looked like this when he smiled. It was like he was a completely different person. So he really did know how to smile. "Where is the wound?" Long Fei Yi asked. Only then did Bailey Mingxiang recover her wits and point at a small scab. "The wound here isn't shallow. If we continue to use the Princess Consort's medicine, it will heal faster, but I'm afraid that the scab will fall off and the scar won't disappear, so this servant doesn't dare continue using medicine." Bailey Mingxiang replied in a low voice. And then, Long Fei Yi asked, "According to what the servant knows, the Imperial Hospital has a medicine called Black Jade Cream. It can heal wounds and prevent scars. Once the scab falls off, there won't be any scars, so there's no need to remove them. It's definitely not a small matter, so this servant doesn't dare to make a decision." Bailey Mingxiang respectfully reported. Long Fei Yi didn't hesitate and said coldly, "Arrange for someone to get the medicine. You can leave first." Bailey Mingxiang only wanted to confirm the birthmark, but she was suddenly chased away. Her heart felt empty. Yes. She retreated silently. Long Fei Yi looked at the phoenix birthmark again and felt that the shape of the birthmark was special. He approached to take a closer look, but who knew that Han Yunxi would suddenly wake up? She yawned in a daze. "Mingxiang." As soon as she said this, she felt that something was wrong. She turned around and saw that Long Fei Yi was also looking at her. "Ah!" Han Yunxi screamed. Long Fei Yi suddenly didn't know what to do. They were clearly in his own home, but he felt like he was a thief. He was unhappy and covered Han Yunxi's mouth. Han Yunxi was completely awake, but she was still panicking. She looked at Long Fei Yi, but found that Long Fei Yi was looking down at her. She followed his gaze and looked down. Only then did she realize that her body was exposed. She wanted to pull the silk quilt to cover it, but unfortunately, the silk quilt was caught by Bailey Mingxiang. She couldn't get it. She panicked and reached out to cover Long Fei Yi's eyes. Thus, the two of them were in a deadlock. One covered her mouth, and the other covered his eyes. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't. He wanted to see, but he couldn't. Ugh. She began to struggle. In the end, Long Fei Yi gave in and let go of her mouth. "Close your eyes," she ordered seriously. Long Fei Yi turned around and didn't look at her. He also took the opportunity to shake off her hand. She then realized that if this man really wanted to act like a rogue, she wouldn't be able to cover his eyes, and she wouldn't be able to cover her own. He sat with his back facing her, so she couldn't see his expression. She quickly got up and wrapped the silk quilt around herself. You can turn around now. Unexpectedly, he didn't turn around. After explaining what Bailey Mingxiang had just said, he got up and walked out of the door. He's leaving just like that? Han Yunxi suddenly felt that she was overthinking. However, before Long Fei left, he said, "Woman, the birthmark on your back is very beautiful. Also, this prince still likes wine red." After he finished speaking, he strode away. If he didn't leave, some things would be really hard to control. Han Yunxi froze on the bed. After a while, she recovered and remembered that she was wearing wine red the last time. This scoundrel. Lowering her head to look at her white skin, Han Yunxi's face turned red as she muttered to herself, "White skin is better, okay?" After confirming that Long Fei had really left, she quickly got out of bed and took out a hand mirror. She covered it with a large mirror to look at her back. She really didn't know that she had a birthmark on her back. It didn't look good looking like this. She struggled for a while before she finally saw the light red mark on her back. It looked like a wing, and it really did look good. So, Long Fei had just seen it below? Han Yunxi's eyes fluttered for a while. It was unknown what she was thinking about. After this matter, Bailey Mingxiang was scolded by Han Yunxi. Bailey Mingxiang was silent at first, but he couldn't help but open his mouth in the end. "Esteemed Princess Consort, you and His Highness are husband and wife. What does this have to do with anything?" Han Yunxi didn't say anything. Bailey Mingxiang was also silent. The atmosphere seemed a little awkward, but he quickly said jokingly, "Esteemed Princess Consort, His Highness dotes on you. You shouldn't make His Highness suffer." Han Yunxi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Between her and Long Fei, this husband, how could it be explained in just a few words? She glanced at Bailey Mingxiang, but still didn't say anything. Bailey Mingxiang smiled and didn't say anything. After another day, the wounds on Han Yunxi's back were all healed. All that was left was to scab. When Bailey Mingxiang sent someone to the Imperial Academy of Medicine to ask for medicine, Gu Beiwer found out about this and specially sent a bottle of anti-itch medicine over. Scabs were the most itchy between scabs forming and scabbing. With Gu Beiwer's anti-itch medicine, Han Yunxi avoided this painful calamity. This morning, just as she and Long Fei were about to set off for the Medicine Ghost Valley, someone suddenly came from the palace. They said that the palace had received a batch of exotic flowers and herbs, so noble Consort Chu invited esteemed Princess Consort Chu to the Imperial Garden to admire them. Even an idiot would know that sightseeing was an excuse, and that there was definitely something fishy going on. Why were there so many things happening? Han Yunxi was irritated and really didn't want to go. However, before she could open her mouth, Long Fei declined for her. This prince and princess consort have important matters to attend to outside the city. We appreciate noble Consort Chu's good intentions. After all, noble Consort Chu wasn't the Empress Dowager or the Empress. The Duke of Qin could still send her away with a few words. Just like this, Han Yunxi happily left the city with Long Fei. Note to the reader, I know it's already the end of the month, but under the current circumstances, I'll have to delay the update. What should I do? Alright, you guys can make your own mustard foam figurines. Chapter 461. Han Yunxi and Long Fei had gone to Medicine Ghost Valley several times. Every time, they would leave in a hurry and return in a hurry, anxious to seek medicine to save lives. However, this time was completely different. Inside the carriage, Long Fei was in no hurry, but Han Yunxi was. If it weren't for the fact that she had just recovered from the injury on her back and Long Fei didn't let her, she probably wouldn't have taken the carriage and would have ridden a horse instead. In the carriage, Long Fei was the same as always, lazily lying back with a scroll of scriptures in his hands. His quiet appearance reminded Han Yunxi of those days in Jiangnan's Plum Blossom Garden. She didn't want to disturb him, but she really couldn't help herself. After hesitating for a while, Han Yunxi finally spoke up. "Your Highness, how many hidden guards did you bring?" Long Fei was still focused on his book as he replied indifferently, "A few. That's not enough, right?" Han Yunshi asked seriously. Only the heavens knew if she was going to seek compensation or challenge him. Long Fei finally raised his head to look at her. Is it not enough to bring this prince? He had only brought his hidden guards for convenience, not to deal with Gu Qisha. Gu Qisha had already been defeated twice by him and had basically been kicked out of his range of defense. Gu Qisha had mixed fake medicine into the antidote for broomcorn millet poison, so it was likely that he was just trying to cheat his way out of it. Han Yunshi wouldn't believe Gu Qisha over him when it came to the matter of the antidote. Thus, Long Fei wasn't too worried about this trip. When the time came, he would just let Han Yunshi do whatever she wanted. All right, Han Yunshi admitted that she was overthinking things. When she saw Long Fei's displeased expression, she joked, "With your highness's martial arts and this concubine's poison skills, we'll be invincible in this world. Why don't you bring me to travel to Jianghu?" Unexpectedly, Long Fei actually replied, "I don't have time." Then he lowered his head and continued reading. Han Yunshi suddenly didn't know what to say. She was clearly joking, couldn't he tell? In reality, Long Fei meant that he didn't have time to chat with her. Han Yunshi herself didn't catch his meaning, but it was fine as long as she kept her mouth shut. Long Fei had loved reading since he was young. What he hated the most was being disturbed while reading. Actually, she didn't have time to read them all the while she was sitting in the same carriage as Long Fei. She was distracted and unable to read anything. She was so busy that she didn't even know that Long had returned. She was always busy, when she was Long's, she was when he was away, Long's was, she was always busy to the point, she didn't know that Long had returned. Only a day had passed. Based on the carriage's speed, it would take at least 2 days to reach the Medicine Ghost Valley. Han Yunshi took out the bottle of antidote for broomcorn millet poison and fiddled with it. Since she had nothing to do, she separated the useless medicinal powders from the antidote and placed them in another porcelain bottle. The rest of the antidote was the pure antidote. Originally, the antidote was 80% full, but after separating out the useless medicinal powders, only 40% of the antidote was left. That was why Gu Qisha had cheated the Duke of Qin out of 40% of the antidote. That was what the numbers said on the surface. However, Han Yunshi wasn't that stupid. Based on the amount of serpent fruit that Han Yunshi knew, if the serpent fruit was used up, they would at least be able to concoct a full bottle of antidote. Since they only had about 40% of the antidote, Gu Qisha had cheated Long Fei out of about 60% of the antidote. Han Yunshi didn't know the exact size of the panoptic red lotus and bear chuan, so there was another possibility. That was, if the serpent fruit was used up, the bear chuan and panoptic red lotus were used up. In that case, they wouldn't be able to concoct a full bottle of antidote. Therefore, she didn't know how much Gu Qisha had cheated Long Fei out of. Han Yunshi silently calculated for a while, then placed the antidote and the useless medicinal powders in front of Long Fei. "Your Highness." Long Fei only replied casually. Han Yunshi sat down and seriously explained the 2 scenarios that she had just calculated to Long Fei. She didn't say approximate, but rather, she said precise. Long Fei didn't say anything at first, but soon, he raised his head to look at Han Yunshi. "Your Highness, I used the amount of serpent fruit as a standard to calculate these 2 scenarios. Even if it's just a single coin, we must get it back," Han Yunshi said seriously. Long Fei looked at her without saying anything. Han Yunshi finally realized that something was wrong with this guy. Just as she was about to say something, Long Fei wrapped his arms around her neck and pulled her into his embrace. How ridiculous! Han Yunshi was about to struggle, but Long Fei warned her, "This prince doesn't have time. If you make any more noise, I'll throw you out." Han Yunshi finally understood the true meaning behind this guy's "he doesn't have time." She was instantly stupefied. The carriage driver outside had been eavesdropping on what was going on inside. When he heard His Highness Duke of Qin's words, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Esteemed Wang Fei really was different. If it was someone else who disturbed His Highness reading, His Highness wouldn't waste time warning them. Instead, he would have directly kicked them out. Han Yunshi tactfully shut her mouth. Leaning against Long Fei's chest, She just happened to see the book in his hand. She discovered that it was a handwritten record of Northern Li's 3 major horse farms. Long Fei Yi flipped to the page that recorded the distribution of water plants at Tianzhe Horse Farm. Heaven knows where Long Fei Yi had gotten his hands on such a confidential book. Once she finished reading it, she'd have a complete grasp of Northern Li's 3 major horse farms. In other words, she'd have a complete grasp of Northern Li's lifeline. Last time, the matter of Northern Li's spies had been a huge provocation to Tianning. This fellow seemed to be calm and collected, but he'd long made a move against Northern Li. Han Yunxi knew that Northern Li's 3 major horse farms wouldn't be able to escape Long Fei Yi's grasp. She wanted to ask more about Northern Li, but when she recalled Long Fei Yi's warning, she remained silent. Unexpectedly, it wasn't long before Long Fei Yi asked, "Have you finished reading?" Han Yunxi really was reading. "I've finished reading." Long Fei Yi flipped to the next page and lowered the book a little. As he read, he said, "Our men have already infiltrated Tianzhe Horse Farm during the horse plague. Yesterday, we received some bad news. Tianzhe Horse Farm isn't in the Imperial Prince's hands, but in Jun Yixie's." The main point of this sentence should have been Jun Yixie, but Han Yunxi's attention was all on the word we. He said we. Did this count as another step forward? This felt much closer than snuggling into his embrace. "Your Highness, it's Qinxie's greatest honor to be able to fight by your side." Han Yunxi's heart was filled with joy as she said, "Your Highness, Jun Yixie is actually very easy to deal with."
What do you mean by that?
Long Fei Yi didn't understand. Fight poison with poison. He's an expert in poisons, so poisons are also his weakness. No one will always be cautious and vigilant in their best field.
Han Yunxi said seriously.
Long Fei Yi nodded in agreement. "What about you? Do I need to fight poison with poison to deal with you? Does your Highness want to deal with me?" Han Yunxi smiled.
Do I need to?
Long Fei Yi asked in return. "Of course there's no need." Han Yunxi replied without thinking. I've never needed to." Long Fei Yi said mildly. Han Yunxi felt that these words sounded strange, but she couldn't pinpoint why. Long Fei Yi's lips curled into a smile, but he didn't explain and continued reading. Han Yunxi didn't think too much of it, but stared and stared with him. Eventually, they began to talk about Northern Li. As they chatted, Han Yunxi shifted her position a few times to make herself snuggled up more comfortably. Her movements were so natural that Long Fei Yi didn't notice. It was as if he was already used to it. The coachman listened from outside and sighed inwardly. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, didn't you say that you'd throw her out if she made any more noise? Why can't you stop talking?" The carriage sped along, getting closer and closer to Medicine Ghost Valley. Unexpectedly, when they were only half a day away from Medicine Ghost Valley, someone rushed out from the bushes and stood in the middle of the road, attempting to block Long Fei Yi's carriage. How could Long Fei Yi's carriage be so easy to block? The coachman saw the person on the road and didn't plan to stop. He didn't slow down and continued to speed forward. Unexpectedly, the person shouted, "Han Yunxi, get out of here." Long Fei Yi naturally sensed that someone was blocking the road, but Han Yunxi didn't know anything. She was very surprised and lifted the curtain. To her surprise, the person standing not far away was none other than Mulinger, whom she hadn't seen for almost a year. Seeing that the carriage was about to rush over and Mulinger still didn't move out of the way, Han Yunxi immediately told the coachman to stop. It really was a sudden break. Mulinger was almost sent flying. However, Mulinger's face didn't show the slightest trace of fear. Instead, it was filled with anger. What's wrong with this girl? Han Yunxi sat high up in the carriage and raised an eyebrow at her. What do you want from me? Mulinger actually drew her sword and pointed it at her. Han Yunxi, you're the most hypocritical woman I've ever seen. Immediately hand over Mute Granny. Otherwise, I won't be polite. Han Yunxi was baffled. What do you mean? You know very well what I mean. Stop pretending. Immediately hand over Mute Granny. Otherwise, you'll die. Mulinger was furious. Han Yunxi was even more confused. I already told you that Mute Granny fell off a cliff and died. What's wrong with you? Mu Linger sneered. You're so hypocritical. Back then, you even suspected that it was my Mu family that caused Mute Granny to fall off the cliff. To think that I explained it to you so seriously. Haha, now that I think about it, it's really laughable. What are you trying to say? Han Yunxi really didn't understand. When Long Fei Yi imprisoned Mu Linger, she was the one who released her. By then, she already knew that Mute Granny had fallen off the cliff, but pretended to use Mute Granny to threaten Mu Linger. She wanted Mu Linger to tell her about Mu Xian. When she saw Mu Linger's concern for Mute Granny, she told her about Mute Granny's fall. She even suspected that the Mu clan was behind Xu Shifeng and Mute Granny's assassination attempts. After all, the Mu clan was the biggest suspect. Why did Mu Linger suddenly show up after so long? She kept calling her a hypocrite, but what did she mean by that? Faced with Han Yunxi's confusion, Mu Linger grew even angrier. She said sternly, Han Yunxi, it was clearly you and Long Fei Yi who imprisoned Mute Granny. Why are you still pretending? You're still lying to me. What's the point? Han Yunxi gave a start before bursting into laughter. What a joke. Mu Linger, do you know what you're saying? She and Long Fei Yi imprisoned Mute Granny? How could that be possible? Chapter 462. Han Yunxi couldn't help but laugh. Inside the carriage, the expressionless Long Fei's expression had long changed. He lifted the curtains slightly to look outside, a sinister glint in his eyes. Han Yunxi didn't know that Long Fei Yi was watching all of this from inside the carriage. She looked at Mu Linger and shook her head. Even though she knew that Mute Granny had fallen off a cliff and her chances of survival were slim, she didn't give up. For the past year, she'd kept asking Long Fei Yi to find her body. It was only recently that she didn't give up. Han Yunxi had always felt guilty about Mute Granny's death. But that didn't mean that Mu Linger had the right to slander her like this. What a hypocritical woman. How dare you bully an innocent old woman? I, Mu Linger, despise you. Mu Linger scolded angrily. She'd said before that if Han Yunxi dared to harm even a hair on Mute Granny's head, she'd look down on her. Han Yunxi was furious as well. She jumped out of the carriage and shouted, Mu Linger, you better show me proof. Otherwise, don't even think about leaving today. Proof? Mu Linger smiled cold. I must have been out of my mind to not suspect you. You're the proof yourselves. What proof do you need from me? Don't try to talk nonsense with me. Han Yunxi snapped. What, do you want me to say it out loud? Mu Linger laughed mockingly. Han Yunxi, the only people who know about Mute Granny are you, the Duke of Qin, and Qi brother. Only my Mu family knows about it. So? Han Yunxi asked. His Highness Duke of Qin is very capable. He was able to take you and Mute Granny away from the encirclement of my father's assassins. Do you think my Mu family has the ability to force Mute Granny to commit suicide? Mu Linger questioned. It wasn't His Highness Duke of Qin who escorted Mute Granny. It was one of his subordinates. Han Yunxi explained. I didn't suspect the Mu family. She did have her suspicions back then, but after Mu Linger's explanation, she no longer doubted the Mu family and stopped causing trouble for them. Mu Yingdong had a use for Mute Granny. He might be able to capture her, but he definitely wouldn't force Mute Granny to fall off the cliff. Moreover, when Mu Linger was exchanged with the treasure, she had also tested him. She was very sure that it was not Mu Yingdong who did it. So, are you sure it's not my Mu family's doing? Mu Linger asked. I'm sure. Just what are you trying to say? Han Yunxi wasn't that patient. Mu Linger was not in a hurry. She asked, then let me ask you again. Will Qi brother kidnap Mute Granny? Han Yunxi didn't even think about it. It can't be him. It was Gu who brought her to see Mute Granny. If it wasn't for Gu, she wouldn't have known about Mute Granny's existence. Gu was also looking for Mute Granny. Very good. Then let me ask you again. There are only so many people who know about Mute Granny. Qi brother and my Mu family aren't suspects. So, are you and Long Fei Yi the biggest suspects? Mu Linger asked. That's a robber's logic. Han Yunxi blurted out. Mu Linger didn't understand, nor did she want to understand. After Chi brother analyzed everything with her, she became angry. She felt that Chi brother's analysis was very reasonable. She believed that the Mu family and Chi brother weren't suspects. However, she didn't believe that Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi weren't suspects. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were the ones who kidnapped Mute Granny and pretended to tell her that Mute Granny had fallen off the cliff. They probably didn't want the Mu family to ask them for Mute Granny. As for why Han Yunxi was looking for Mute Granny, it seemed to have something to do with her family background. Chi brother had been vague about it, so she didn't want to know more about it. She just wanted to get Mute Granny back and expose Han Yunxi's hypocritical mask. She asked loudly, "If you and Long Fei Yi didn't kidnap her, then where did Mute Granny go?
Who kidnapped Mute Granny? Tell me."
I also want to know who kidnapped her. I've been investigating for a year, but I couldn't find anything. Han Yunxi was furious. What was Robber's logic? The so-called bandit logic was a logic that did not make sense. It was a logic that was twisted and unreasonable. From Mu Ling-er's point of view, if she excluded the Mu family and Gu, did that mean she and Long Fei Yi were the culprits? How could she explain this logic to her? It would have been better if Han Yunxi hadn't explained herself. Once she did, Mu Ling-er laughed out loud. Her laughter became even more sarcastic. "Han Yunxi, you said that Mute Granny was escorted by his subordinates. Are all of His Highness Duke of Qin's subordinates useless? It's fine if they can't protect Mute Granny, but they can't even find a single clue? Who are you trying to fool?" Han Yunxi was slightly taken aback. She had to admit that this was the one thing she couldn't figure out the most. Actually, if she were to stand in Mu Ling-er's point of view, she might also use Robber's logic to question this matter. When Gu first learned that Mute Granny had fallen off the cliff, he'd questioned this point as well. Mute Granny's escort had been Chu Shifeng, Long Fei Yi's most skilled martial artist. Even if Mute Granny had fallen off the cliff because of his incompetence, he should have been able to find some clues among the bandits. Otherwise, the bandits wouldn't have escaped without leaving any clues behind. After all, they'd been investigating for a year without finding a single clue. Leaving aside Mu Ling-er, even Han Yunxi didn't think it was possible. Even so, Han Yunxi never suspected Long Fei Yi. Even if she suspected everyone who knew about Mute Granny, she wouldn't suspect Long Fei Yi. After all, Long Fei Yi was on her side. If she suspected Long Fei Yi, wouldn't that be the same as suspecting herself? The explanation she gave herself was that the robbers were mysterious. She even suspected that the robbers might know a lot about Mu Xian, so they also knew about Mute Granny. It wasn't the first time she and Long Fei had discussed the matter. But since they couldn't find any clues, they could only wait for the bandits to make their next move. Of course, Han Yunxi didn't want to explain any of this to Mu Ling-er anymore. She'd explained enough already. No matter how much she tried, Mu Ling-er wouldn't believe her. "If you don't believe me, then forget it. There's no point in me saying more." "Out of the way," Han Yunxi said coldly. "What? You're feeling guilty? Don't tell me you think those bandits have powerful backgrounds and powerful martial arts. That's laughable." Han Yunxi's heart felt stifled at Mu Ling-er's words. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered such an unreasonable situation, but Mu Ling-er's self-righteous indignation made her want to retort, but she couldn't. Fine. She admitted that she and Long Fei Yi were indeed suspicious, but only they knew that they were innocent. Han Yunxi looked deeply at Mu Ling-er. Without saying a word, she turned to get into the car. Unexpectedly, Mu Ling-er suddenly shouted, "Hand over Mute Granny, or don't even think about leaving." As she said that, she raised her sword and charged. Unfortunately, before she could get close to Han Yunxi, Shadow Guard Su Donglin appeared. He blocked her sword and forced her to the ground. Mu Ling-er wasn't satisfied and immediately jumped up. "Han Yunxi, you're feeling guilty, aren't you?" Han Yunxi ignored her and got into the car. Mu Ling-er didn't say anything because she didn't have time to block Su Donglin's sword. She didn't have time to speak. Her medical skills were top-notch, but her martial arts were average. She was already very lucky to be able to block 3 of Su Donglin's moves. After Han Yunxi got into the car, she saw that Long Fei Yi was still marking the papers. She sat to the side and propped her head up in thought, but didn't say anything. When she heard the sounds of swords clashing outside the car become more and more intense, she said to Long Fei Yi, "Let's go. Don't offend the Mu family too much. After all, they control Medicine City." Han Yunxi knew that Long Fei Yi's indifference didn't mean that he didn't mind. He just didn't like to talk nonsense. Su Donglin, a shadow guard, was enough to kill Mu Ling. Long Fei really did want to kill her, but Han Yunxi's words weren't wrong either. Once he killed Mu Linger, he'd be going head-to-head with the Mu clan. Muing Dong wouldn't swallow such humiliation. For the time being, he didn't want to touch the powers of the four cities, so he didn't want to cause trouble for them. "Fubo, why aren't we leaving?" Long Fei Yi asked. Yes, yes. Only then did the coachman Fubo start the car. Seeing this, Su Donglin hurriedly followed, no longer paying attention to Mu Ling. Mu Ling had been knocked to the ground long ago. With her right leg injured, it was difficult for her to walk, let alone chase after them. She stood up with difficulty and angrily threw away her sword, silently cursing herself for being brainless. As soon as she received Chi Brother's secret letter and learned that Han Yunxi would be passing by, she impulsively came looking for her. She didn't know that Long Fei Yi was also traveling with her. Under these circumstances, how could she deal with Han Yunxi? She was simply courting death. After being angry for a long time, Mu Ling obediently sat down and bandaged the sword wound on her right leg. Then, she obediently picked up the sword that she had thrown away and used it as a crutch. She didn't know where Chi Brother had gone. A few days ago, he looked for her for tea and analyzed the matter of Mute Granny with her. But that night, he disappeared again. It wasn't until this morning that he sent her a secret letter. She really didn't know what Chi Brother was busy with. But this time, she was still very happy. Chi Brother only told her about Mute Granny and asked her to test Han Yunxi. He didn't ask her himself. This was enough to show that Chi Brother had seen through Han Yunxi's hypocrisy. He wasn't like before where he was led by the nose by Han Yunxi. Mu Ling really didn't realize who was the one being led by the nose. As for what Gu had been busy with recently, only he himself knew. At this moment, in Medicine Ghost Valley, Gu Qisha was watering the expensive medicinal plants in his courtyard. The Medicine Ghost Valley was huge, and there were a lot of medicinal plants in it. However, the medicinal plants in the inconspicuous corners of his courtyard were the most expensive ones in the entire valley. Normally, he would let the old steward take care of them, but when he returned, he would personally tend to them. "Master, there's a woman outside. Her baby is only a few months old and has contracted a strange disease. She wants to ask for solid foundation grass." The old steward reported timidly. Gu Qisha pretended not to hear him and carefully washed the leaves of his precious medicinal plants. The old steward hesitated for a moment before saying, "Master, that woman is quite pitiful. She's injured and can't take care of her baby. Even after being born, the baby still doesn't know who its mother is. Sigh, it's quite sad to say this. How about?" Gu Qisha continued to ignore him. The old steward sighed softly. He knew that it was useless to say anything more. There were so many people outside who wanted to ask for medicine. His heart would occasionally soften, but unfortunately, it was useless. Just as the old steward was about to leave, a young servant hurried over and signaled to him. The old steward immediately understood what was going on. He hurriedly turned back and reported, "Master, His Highness Duke of Qin and the others are here." His Excellency Pillfiend had been waiting for His Highness Duke of Qin and esteemed Wang Fei for several days now. Chapter 463. It was already late at night. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi waited outside the courtyard. Han Yunxi discovered that the number of people begging for medicine had not decreased, but had actually increased. Regardless of gender, age, or gender, everyone was kneeling. It was as if they would be able to beg for medicine as long as they obediently knelt for a bit longer. In reality, Whether or not they would be able to beg for medicine depended entirely on Gu Qisha's mood. If he was in a good mood one day, he might just pick a few people to deliver the medicine to. If he was in a bad mood, unless they offered something he was interested in exchange for the medicine, they would have to keep kneeling and begging. The last time Han Yunxi had come here, she had paid special attention to a few faces. This time, she looked around and quickly found them again. It had been at least 2 months since the last time she came here. They hadn't managed to beg for medicine, but they hadn't given up either. From the looks of it, there were probably people who had been kneeling here for half a year. Based on Gu Qisha's personality, kneeling here for half a year would probably cause him to return empty-handed. This Gu Qisha, if he didn't want to give them medicine, he should have directly rejected them. Why did he have to let them kneel here and give them out depending on his mood? Han Yunxi looked at the dense crowd and cursed under her breath. Despicable. At this time, the old steward personally opened the door. Your Highness Duke of Qin, esteemed Wang Fei, sorry for the wait. Please come in. Han Yunxi and Long Fei were just about to enter when the sound of hurried horse hooves came from behind them, followed by a servant's anguished wail. Master! Master! Madam has passed away. The night before yesterday, Madam passed away. A middle-aged man in the crowd shot to his feet and looked over in a daze. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. The servants around him supported him, and someone anxiously pinched his philtrum. The servant got off his horse and scrambled over, tears streaming down his face. Master, master, wake up. The estate is still waiting for you to return and preside over the situation. Hurry and bring me some hot water. Han Yunxi tossed out these words before rushing over like an arrow. The old steward glanced at Long Fei, but Long Fei was looking at his Wang Fei and ignored him. The old housekeeper could only silently agree that the princess consort was ordering him around. Han Yunxi asked the people surrounding the middle-aged man to move away so that the air could circulate. She laid him flat and checked his breathing and heartbeat before taking his pulse. When the old butler brought the water over, she had already confirmed that the patient's life was not in danger. Because he was too tired, his liver was depressed for a long time, and coupled with a sudden blow, he vomited blood. From the servant's words, it could be inferred that this master should have come to ask for medicine on behalf of the madam. Unfortunately, before the medicine could be obtained, the madam had passed away. His life was not in danger, but he was still unconscious. Who knew how he would face the cruel reality when he woke up? Han Yunxi sighed faintly. She gave the servant some first-aid pills and the hot water brought by the old housekeeper before leaving. The old butler followed behind without making a sound. Han Yunxi couldn't help but ask, "Butler, she fainted. Did all of you save her?" Princess Consort, there are people kneeling here because they're tired, sick, and people like her who can't take the blow every day. Sickness and death are normal for people. If you want to save them, wouldn't the Medicine Ghost Valley become a clinic? The old butler said helplessly. Then why are you planting these herbs? Are you planting them for fun? Han Yunxi suddenly asked in a loud voice. Instantly, everyone looked over. The old butler did not dare to quarrel with this master and wanted to persuade her to leave, but the person in the courtyard could not wait for him to come out. Princess Consort is right. We're planting them for fun. This voice was filled with laughter and sarcasm. Han Yunxi immediately looked over and saw that Gu Qisha had unknowingly appeared on the courtyard wall. His large black robe was fluttering in the night wind, making him look like a ghost in the night. That's Sir Pill Fiend. Sir Pill Fiend has appeared. It was unknown who had suddenly shouted from the crowd, but the entire courtyard was stirred up. The people who had been standing all knelt down and begged with everyone else. Sir Pill Fiend, please do a good deed. Please save my mother. Sir Pill Fiend, this old man has been kneeling here for 3 months now. This old man is willing to give up his life here, so please save my son. Countless pleas broke the moonlit night in the valley with Ningjing. Han Yunxi was speechless at these people, but if they didn't beg, what else could she do? Gu Qisha ignored all of this and turned a deaf ear to it. His smiling eyes swept past Long Fei and landed on Han Yunxi. Princess Consort, planting herbs is a very fun thing to do. If you're interested, Medicine Ghost Valley welcomes you at any time. Long Fei Yi looked on in confusion. Gu Qixia seemed to be very excited about their arrival. Could it be that this guy was so confident in his adulterated medicine? Wasn't he in a hurry to ask them why they were here? Of course. Long Fei Yi kept his confusion to himself and did not show it. Playing with human lives, isn't Sir Pill Fiend afraid of being punished by the heavens? Han Yunxi angrily cursed. A trace of ruthlessness flashed through Gu Qixia's eyes. Heavenly punishment? Ever since he left Medical City, he had never been afraid. After everything he'd experienced in Medical City, how could he lose to heavenly punishment? However, when faced with Han Yunxi, Gu Qixia's eyes held a trace of a smile. Qin Wangfei, it's not good for you to slander me like this. Sir, I'm only a farmer, not a murderer. Don't misunderstand. You're 100 times more despicable than murdering people for their wealth. Don't think I don't know that you bought hundreds of herbs from other places. They're all rare treasures. Each of them can save several lives. You bought them, but didn't use them. What's the difference between that and taking someone's life? Han Yunxi questioned. If this guy hadn't bought those herbs, those who needed them could still buy them and beg for them. But since he'd bought them, those who needed them would have to kneel here and wait for him to be in a good mood. Sir, I didn't steal or rob. I bought them with real money and kept them as my treasures. How could you blame me for that? Gu Qixia said innocently, but a trace of amusement flashed through his eyes. He could sense that Han Yunxi's visit this time was different from last time. The smell of gunpowder was very strong this time. Just as he'd expected, this woman was here to settle accounts with him. Treasures? Do you think they're gold, stone, antiques, or paintings? Han Yunxi was incredulous. Gu Qixia, you've used your status and wealth to steal those herbs for your treasures, yet you've watched as those who needed them died. Don't you feel the slightest bit of guilt? No one forced you to save people, but can't you refrain from harming others? Han Yunxi's voice wasn't loud, but it caused those who were kneeling and begging to stop. Everyone turned to look at her, only to see this young woman exuding an aura of righteousness and dignity. Finally, someone stood out from the crowd. Good. Well said. This old man doesn't want this life anymore. I won't beg him again to boost his arrogance. That person had come to beg for medicine for his own sake, so after he finished speaking, he really left with a flick of his sleeves. After that, more and more people stood up. Some cursed Gu Qixia, some spat at him, and some left without saying a word. In short, many people left one after another. Gu Qixia stared at the scene in disbelief. He had established Medicine Fiend Valley for many years now, and anyone who came to beg him for help had been driven to a dead end. Therefore, once someone knelt here, they would usually leave in despair. He had never seen anyone throw a tantrum and leave in anger. Who would dare to throw a tantrum in front of him? Gu Qixia hated this kind of situation. He'd hoarded medicinal herbs without buying them for 2 reasons. First, it was out of interest, and second, he enjoyed watching people struggle to survive. What he liked the most was not these family members begging for medicine, but the patients. He especially liked seeing people on the verge of death. Death, to him, was a blessing. The old steward thought that his master was about to get angry, but he didn't expect Gu Qixia to laugh. Qin Wangfei, you're the one who's murdering for money. You've tricked them away. What if I'm happy and want to give them medicine? Where am I supposed to find them? They'll be back very soon. Han Yunxi was certain. She didn't want to waste any more words with Gu Qixia. This guy's skin was extremely thick. No matter how much she scolded him, he would still laugh. This feeling reminded Han Yunxi of Gu, but she didn't have time to think about the similarities between the two of them. Coldly, she said, they're not here to beg for medicine. They're here to collect a debt. Gu Qixia had been waiting for these words for a long time, but he feigned confusion as he looked at Long Fei Yi. Your Highness, Duke of Qin, I've already repaid my debt to you, haven't I? Long Fei Yi didn't answer. Instead, he walked into the courtyard with his hands behind his back. Han Yunxi immediately followed after him, ignoring Gu Qixia. He was clearly the master, but Gu Qixia felt like he was being left out in the cold. This was especially so when he saw Han Yunxi eagerly following Long Feiyi's back. He did a beautiful backflip and chased after them. Long Feiyi, I'll wait and see if Han Yunxi will still follow you out later. Han Yunxi clearly wanted to have a long chat with Long Feiyi. She usually didn't take the initiative to enter the room, but this time, she entered uninvited and sat down at the tea table with Long Feiyi. Gu Qixia floated in, his black robes draping over the floor. Only the heavens knew how his legs floated. He sat down on the main seat and said coldly, Long Feiyi, I've already repaid the 2 medicines I owed you. I even concocted the medicine for you for free. What else do I owe you? Tell me clearly. Long Feiyi calmly sipped his tea, treating Gu Qixia like air. Han Yunxi was also calmly sipping her tea. Let Gu Qixia keep up the act. She'll deal with him after she moistens her throat and rests. This guy mixed the antidote with a fake antidote, so he should know what kind of debt we're here for. Gu Qixia was impatient for the show to begin, so he deliberately stood up. If the 2 of you are here to drink tea, I won't entertain you. He was about to leave when Han Yunxi sneered. Gu Qixia, you should recognize this, right? Han Yunxi took out a bottle of antidote from her sleeve. It was the antidote to the broomcorn millet poison that Long Feiyi had taken from Gu Qixia. Gu Qixia was secretly delighted. He raised his brows and asked, so, what if I recognize it? Han Yunxi opened the bottle and handed it to him. Take a closer look. This is the antidote to the broomcorn millet poison. I personally concocted it, so how could I not recognize it? Gu Qixia said disapprovingly. At least half of this antidote is fake. You've mixed it for yourself. Han Yunxi angrily exposed him. Gu Qixia pretended to be shocked. He paused for a moment before regaining his senses. What a joke. You think it's fake just because you say so? Where's your proof? If this isn't proof, then what is? Han Yunxi did not use any tools. Her movements were elegant and nimble as she poured the antidote back and forth between the 2 bottles. With great precision, she divided the fake antidote into 2. One bottle contained the real antidote to the broomcorn millet poison, while the other contained the fake antidote to the broomcorn millet poison. She casually tossed the fake antidote to him and said coldly, Gu Qixia, this is the proof. Chapter 464. With Gu Qixia and Han Yunxi's skills, they would be able to tell that the antidote wasn't the real antidote the moment they received it, so there was no need for them to test it. Gu Qixia was secretly impressed by Han Yunxi's ability to separate medicinal powders. Even he couldn't compare to her. Being in contact with medicine all year round, he had a rough idea of what was going on. Based on the amount of fake medicine in his hand, he could roughly estimate that Long Feiyi had used up about 20% of the antidote. Han Yunxi, I don't think it's your Qin Wangfei style to casually use some useless medicinal powders to trick people, right? Gu Qixia laughed disdainfully. He was clearly implying that Han Yunxi had purposely used some fake medicine to trick him. Han Yunxi already knew that Gu Qixia wouldn't admit to it so easily. Since she was here, she must have made ample preparations. She slowly sat down. Gu Qixia, the amount of serpent fruit that His Highness gave you should be about 3 taels and 2 qian, right? So what if it is? Gu Qixia couldn't deny this. Are you sure? Han Yunxi wanted a definite answer. Yes. Gu Qixia readily admitted. Very good. According to the antidote formula for broomcorn millet poison, if you use up all of the serpent fruit that's worth about 3 taels and 2 qian, you'll need to make 1.5 bottles of this antidote. May I ask if you've used up all of the serpent fruit? Han Yunxi asked seriously. A hint of admiration flashed across Gu Qixia's eyes. He didn't think that Han Yunxi would think of this method, but he wasn't afraid. The person he wanted to trick was Long Feiyi, so he had naturally put in a lot of effort. Gu Qixia glanced at Long Feiyi, only to see that Long Feiyi didn't react at all. He was leisurely sipping his tea, as if he was a bystander watching a show. Let him be idle for the time being. Let's see if he can keep his composure later. I didn't use up all of it. Gu Qixia replied. Han Yunxi nodded, then asked, How much did you use? Gu Qixa's eyes flashed as he replied, 2 taels and 7 chien. Han Yunxi was puzzled. Are you sure? Why would Gu Qixia report such a number? If this guy had used a snake fruit that was worth 2 taels and 7 chien, then the antidote he had concocted should have been filled to the brim. But he'd given Long Fei an 80% full. Wasn't this fellow digging a hole for himself to jump into by giving such a number? I'm sure, Gu Qixia said coldly. The antidote made from the snake fruit is the whole bottle. You only gave it 80% full. What do you mean? Han Yunxi immediately asked. This time, Gu Qixia slammed the table and stood up. Han Yunxi, even if you want to trick me, don't think I'm an idiot. I clearly gave you a whole bottle. As Gu Qixia spoke, he glared at Long Fei. Duke of Qin, speak. Long Fei glanced over and said disapprovingly, only 8 points.
Long Fei you.
Gu Qixia was enraged. Long Fei ignored him. There was no point in arguing when there was no evidence. Only trust was useful. Obviously, Han Yunxi would only trust Long Fei. Moreover, her focus wasn't on whether the antidote Gu Qixia had given Long Fei was 80% full or not. Regardless of how much it was, she would be able to deduce the truth based on the snake fruit. You're competing. If you say it's 100%, then it's 100%. Han Yunxi was very generous. Gu Qixia already knew that Han Yunxi would only trust Long Fei in this matter. He looked at Han Yunxi and waited for her to continue her analysis. Gu Qixia, you used a snake fruit that was worth 2 taels and 7 chien to concoct a full bottle of antidote, right? Han Yunxi asked seriously. Yes. Gu Qixia replied loudly. Then what about the remaining 5 chien snake fruit powder? Han Yunxi asked. There was a special way to use the snake fruit. A single snake fruit had to be broken into 2 halves. Both halves had to be crushed into powder before they were mixed together to form a uniform powder. Only then would the powder be effective and could be used. Gu Qixia originally had a snake fruit, but it was a pity that Long Fei had destroyed it. He couldn't use it at all. But now, whether or not he had the snake fruit powder in his hands, only he knew in his heart. Gu Qixia looked at Han Yunxi and didn't answer for a long time. Where's the stuff? Han Yunxi asked again. Qin Wangfei, even though you're not a member of the pharmaceutical world, you should know the rules of the pharmaceutical world, right? Gu Qixia finally asked. What he was talking about was the rule of not taking any leftover ingredients. The leftover ingredients would belong to the person who concocted the medicine. Han Yunxi naturally knew this, but she still replied, you know that this Princess Consort is an outsider, so, I don't know. If you don't know, then let me tell you. This daddy was the one who concocted the medicine, so the leftover ingredients belong to this daddy. No one can take them away. Gu Qixia said arrogantly. This Princess Consort already said that this Princess Consort doesn't know the rules. So are you going to give it to me or not? Han Yunxi's tone was laced with a hint of threat. As soon as she finished speaking, Long Fei, who had been silent all this time, suddenly stood up. It was obvious that he was about to attack. No matter how one looked at it, he looked like one of Han Yunxi's assassins. One look was all it took to command him. Gu Qixia glanced at Long Fei with resentment in his eyes, but he didn't show any intention of moving. However, when Long Fei raised his sword, Gu Qixia immediately said, forget it, forget it. This daddy has used up all of the snake fruit. Is that enough? Used it all? Then you'll need a bottle and a half of the antidote. Even if you used a full bottle of the antidote, what about the remaining half? Han Yunxi asked. Gu Qixia fell silent again. Where's the antidote? Han Yunxi pressed. What? This Princess Consort can't get it from you, so I need His Highness Duke of Qin to step in? She didn't mean to step in. She meant to make a move. Gu Qixia reluctantly tossed over a packet of snake fruit powder. This is all that's left. Han Yunxi knew that this guy wasn't telling the truth. Fortunately, she had the detoxification system, which allowed her to perform precise calculations. Otherwise, she really would have been fooled by this guy. She took the packet of snake fruit powder and lightly weighed it in her hand. She was certain that there was about 1.5 grams left. From the looks of it, Gu Qisha had only used 1.5 grams of snake fruit. That meant that the Bear Chuan and Panoptic Red Lotus didn't have much left. In other words, there wouldn't be much antidote left. Based on the ratio of 1.5 grams of snake fruit to 1.5 grams of antidote, Han Yunxi could immediately estimate how much broomcorn millet poison antidote could be made from 1.5 grams of snake fruit. However, concocting an antidote wasn't done according to this kind of conventional ratio. The ratio would change if the ratio was adjusted. This was a professional and complicated calculation. However, with the help of the detoxification system, Han Yunxi didn't have to use her brain at all. She blurted out, "Gu Qisha, you used 1.5 grams of snake fruit. This amount should be enough to make about 60% of the antidote." 60%. If Gu Qisha said he'd given Long Fei an entire bottle of antidote, then didn't that mean the remaining 40% was fake? Gu Qisha had slapped himself in the face this time. Long Fei Yi couldn't help but smile when he heard this. Gu Qisha had been lying all this while, but this woman had exposed each and every one of his lies. He had to admit that he was impressed by Han Yunxi's ability to think and calculate. How could Gu Qisha not be impressed? He had guessed that Han Yunxi would be able to tell that the antidote was fake, but he hadn't expected that Han Yunxi would be able to make such a complicated and precise calculation. He had originally planned to lure her into calculating these numbers, but now he hadn't done anything and Han Yunxi had already calculated everything. This conclusion of slapping himself in the face was exactly what he had wanted. Gu Qisha was overjoyed, but he pretended to fly into a rage out of humiliation. "Han Yunxi, that's enough. It's just a portion of the antidote. I'll return it to you." As he spoke, he pulled out a porcelain bottle and threw it at her. Han Yunxi caught it and immediately weighed it in her hand. This bottle only contained 10% of the antidote. She had just separated 40% of the antidote from Long Fei Ye's bottle of 80% full antidote. Adding the 10% that Gu Qisha had given her, it was only 50%. There was still 10% missing. Han Yunxi angrily slammed the bottle onto the table and said angrily, "Gu Qisha, we've already reached this point, and you still want to keep it for yourselves? Take out the remaining 10%. The moment she said this, Gu Qisha was enraged. "This old man gave you a full bottle, and half of it was the real antidote. You've been lying from the start. Do you still think that your words can be trusted? It's clearly only 80%. You still want to argue?" Han Yunxi angrily retorted. Gu Qisha suddenly stood up. "Han Yunxi, this old man's mouth is full of lies, but this old man is telling the truth. Go and ask Long Fei yourself whether or not this old man gave you a full bottle." Han Yunxi wouldn't ask Long Fei Yi because she didn't think it was necessary. Coldly, she replied, "Why should this princess believe you?" In reality, Gu Qisha had already prepared everything. He was just pretending to be deep in thought and didn't say anything. Han Yunxi's lips curled into a mocking smile as she calmly sat down. She was waiting. Long Fei Yi was also waiting. The amount of antidote had already been calculated. As for how much he would get and how much Gu Qisha would keep for himself, these were things that no matter how good one's calculation skills were, they wouldn't be able to calculate. Without any evidence, no one could say for sure. Furthermore, what evidence could there be for something like this? When he took the antidote away, there was no notary to testify, and he couldn't accurately calculate the amount of antidote. Now, it was time to see who could win Han Yunxi's trust more. Long Fei Yi continued to drink his tea without batting an eyelid while Han Yunxi looked at Gu Qisha and began to calculate her compensation. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Gu Qisha suddenly looked over. "Qin Wangfei, I have evidence." Long Fei Yi immediately looked over. Han Yunxi, on the other hand, didn't think much of it. She couldn't imagine what kind of evidence could there be for something like this. Gu Qisha picked up the white porcelain bottle that contained the antidote and gently sniffed it before pouring out all of the antidote. Han Yunxi looked at him suspiciously. "What are you trying to do?" Gu Qisha didn't say anything and simply smashed the porcelain bottle onto the ground, shattering it into 4 or 5 pieces. This time, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were both puzzled. What was this guy trying to do? Gu Qixia picked up the porcelain bottles one by one with great interest and placed them on the tea table with the sides facing the sky. Gu Qixia, what kind of evidence is this? Han Yunxi couldn't help but ask. Gu Qixia smiled but didn't say anything. He flipped the porcelain bottles over one by one until the insides faced the sky. At this moment, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi finally realized that something was wrong with the porcelain bottles. Chapter 465. Gu Qixia flipped the fragments over one by one, only to see that the insides of the fragments had all turned black.
How could this be?
What could have caused this white porcelain to turn black? Porcelain and glass utensils were very stable. If it was not under high temperature, they would not be corroded by drugs. Even some strong acidic drugs would not be able to damage porcelain and glass utensils. Therefore, most of the bottles used to store drugs were porcelain and glass. The antidote for broomcorn millet poison had an average pH level, so even if it was kept in a bottle for several years, it would not react with the porcelain. Could it be that it was those ineffective powders? Han Yunxi immediately looked at the porcelain bottle containing the ineffective powders, while Long Fei Yi looked at Gu Qixia with a trace of unease in his eyes. Gu Qixia's earlier anger was all an act. Ever since he found out that Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi had arrived, he had been in a good mood. He looked meaningfully at Long Fei Yi, but was not in a hurry to speak. The three of them remained silent, each with their own thoughts. Han Yunxi had already activated the detoxification system to conduct a thorough analysis of the ineffective powders. She had not paid much attention to the fact that the powders were fake and ineffective, so she had focused all her attention on the dosage of the powders. From Han Yunxi's experience, the black porcelain bottle was most likely caused by the ineffective powders. Either the ineffective powders had reacted with the porcelain bottle, or the ineffective powders had been affected by the broomcorn millet poison and changed the color of the porcelain bottle. Medicine, regardless of whether it was Western medicine, Chinese medicine, or toxicology, was very similar to the principles of chemistry. They were all about the reaction of various medicinal ingredients. In order to understand the reaction of these medicinal ingredients, one must have a deep understanding of the various ingredients in these medicinal ingredients. Gu Qixia had used an ineffective medicinal powder, but there were too many types of such powders. Han Yunxi didn't know much about the one before her, but she knew that it wouldn't affect the antidote's effects, aura, or color when mixed into the antidote. As for other information, she really did not know. Under such circumstances, if she wanted to solve the mystery of why the porcelain bottle turned black, there was only one way, and that was to do an experiment on the spot. However, the powerful existence of the detoxification system allowed Han Yunxi to avoid the troublesome experimental steps. When Gu Qixia saw the serious expression on Han Yunxi's face, the playful look in his eyes deepened. He had concocted these useless powders specifically to trick Long Fei Yi. No matter how capable Han Yunxi was, she wouldn't be able to figure it out just by thinking about it. He conservatively estimated that this girl must be doing a complicated experiment, and it would take at least 2 or 3 days to get the answer. In fact, not to mention 2 or 3 days, even if it was 2 or 3 years, he would be more than happy to oblige. In any case, when he looked at this girl, his time would always pass very quickly, and it would seem that his life was not so long. Gu Qixia had specially brewed a cup of the highest quality tea. Without saying a word, he poured 2 cups for Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi with a faint smile on his face. Han Yunxi was so focused on cooperating with the detoxification system that she did not notice the uniqueness of the tea's fragrance. However, Long Fei Yi immediately recognized it. This was Red South Peak. Long Fei Yi's suspicious gaze swept past Gu Qixia's eyes. He picked up the tea and sipped it, remaining silent. Esteemed Wang Fei, you should try it too. Gu Qixia smiled. However, Han Yunxi suddenly asked in a cold voice, Gu Qixia, what do you mean by that?
What do you mean by that?
Gu Qixia feigned ignorance. He thought that this girl had probably guessed that there was something wrong with the useless powders. No wonder he admired her so much. She really was an expert. There's an ingredient called poppy grass in these useless powders, right? Han Yunxi asked. Gu Qixia was surprised. You can tell? So I'm right? Han Yunxi asked back.
Yes.
Gu Qisha generously admitted that there was indeed poppy grass in the useless powders. However, the amount was very small. It was not something that a normal person could detect just by smelling or tasting it. He had originally thought that aside from himself, anyone who wanted to detect poppy grass in these powders would have to do a series of tests to detect it. How did this girl discover it? Judging by her expression, she probably did not do any tests on these useless powders before coming here. Gu Qisha was still puzzling over this when Han Yunxi asked, in the antidote for broomcorn millet poison, when the fruity scent of the serpent fruit and the vermilion water of the panoptic red lotus are mixed together, they form something called mulberry mugwort. Is that right? Gu Qisha narrowed his eyes. That's right. Once mulberry mugwort and poppy grass are placed together and sealed together in porcelain, they will burn the porcelain and cause it to turn black, Han Yunxi explained before elegantly sipping her tea. Gu Qisha was already stunned. He simply could not believe his ears. This girl was absolutely right.
How could this be?
Although poppy grass, mulberry mugwort, and vermilion water were not very rare and were not known to many people, this combination reaction, including the reaction between them and porcelain, was something that no one knew about. After all, he had spent 3 days and gone through a series of precise extraction, calculations, and concoctions before he could arrive at this conclusion. How could Han Yunxi have figured it all out after looking at it for such a short while? Gu Qisha stared fixedly at Han Yunxi's clear and bright eyes. He almost suspected that this girl's eyes were a pair of demonic pupils. Han Yunxi knew that Gu Qisha was looking at her and knew that he would be shocked. However, she remained calm and continued to sip her tea. She only felt that the fragrance of this tea was very familiar, but could not pinpoint the exact type of tea. She guessed that it was a very rare type. Actually, her detoxification system did not store this type of useless powders. However, the detoxification system had all the ingredients in the useless powders, so it could provide a perfect answer. However, she did not understand Gu Qisha's motive for doing this. After the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, she finally spoke. Gu Qisha, you've turned the porcelain bottle black. How do you prove that you didn't secretly keep that 10% of the antidote? No matter how complicated the process was, they wanted to pursue the matter of the missing 10% of the antidote. Gu Qisha finally regained his senses and smiled. Little girl, then, do you know how long the mulberry mugwort and poppy grass had to be sealed in the porcelain bottle for the bottle to turn black? And how much of the antidote was needed to turn the entire bottle black? Once he said this, the expressionless Long Fei Ye's face suddenly changed.
He understood now.
When Gu Qisha had concocted the antidote, he must have carefully calculated the amount of antidote he secretly hid, the amount he mixed, and even the size of the porcelain bottle he gave him. Without a doubt, it must have been a full bottle of antidote in order to completely turn the inside of the porcelain bottle black. What a good Gu Qisha, to think that he had kept such a trick up his sleeve. It went without saying that this was proof enough to prove that he had taken away a full bottle of antidote. Seeing that he could no longer hide the matter of the bottle's weight, Long Fei Yi remained as calm as Mount Tai. He pondered over Gu Qisha's motive for doing this. If he wanted to secretly hide the antidote, he could have just mixed it up. Why did he have to leave such a trick up his sleeve to prove that he had given him a full bottle? At this moment, Han Yunxi was silent. Little girl, do you know or not? Gu Qisha chuckled as he asked. Han Yunxi had not realized this point. If she wanted an answer, she would have estimated the size of the porcelain bottle and the detoxification system would have given her the answer. However, she did not move for a long time and felt uneasy for some reason. Since Gu Qisha dared to ask such a question, he must have a lot of confidence. Little girl, it looks like you don't know. Hee, then let's try it out on the spot. Gu Qisha's voice was full of glee. He quickly took out a small porcelain bottle that was half the size of the previous one and added 30% of the antidote to the broomcorn millet poison and 20% of the ineffective medicinal powder. Then, he deliberately slowed down his movements and smiled at Han Yunxi as he slowly poured the powder into the porcelain bottle. Although he was smiling at Han Yunxi, he had been paying attention to Long Feiyi from the corner of his eyes. The show that he had been waiting for was about to begin. The big event that he had been preparing for a long time was about to happen. As the medicinal powder was slowly poured into the porcelain bottle, the truth would be revealed. Han Yunxi could not help but look at Long Feiyi. Only then did she realize that Long Feiyi was also looking at her. At this moment, it was unknown what Han Yunxi was thinking. Her expression was unsightly, heavy, and complicated. On the other hand, Long Feiyi appeared calm, but his usually cold and aloof eyes were heavy. The two of them looked at each other in silence. Only they knew what each other was thinking. Seeing this, Gu Qixia lightly snorted. "Little girl, this bottle is half the size of the original bottle. This medicinal powder is 30% of the real medicine and 20% of the fake medicine. Mix it according to the original ratio, and the amount is also half of the original. Look carefully." Han Yunxi looked at him silently and did not reply. Gu Qixia had already poured all the medicinal powder into the bottle. He raised it high and gently shook it in front of Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi. Then, he poured out all the medicinal powder and handed the porcelain bottle to Han Yunxi. "Little girl, take a look at this." Han Yunxi did not take the bottle. Gu Qixia laughed. "What? You don't dare. Why don't His Highness Duke of Qin do it instead?" As soon as he finished speaking, Han Yunxi decisively picked up the porcelain bottle and smashed it on the ground. The shattered pieces scattered all over the floor. Some of them were facing upwards, while others were facing downwards. Han Yunxi seemed to be competing with Gu Qixia. She immediately bent down to pick them up. Long Feiyi could not stop her even if he wanted to. He had only picked up the second piece when his index finger was cut. Long Feiyi frowned slightly. He took her hand and gently sucked on her index finger. His eyes were lowered, and he was exceptionally focused. His movements were very gentle and delicate. Han Yunxi could even feel the tip of his tongue gently pressing against her fingertip. This feeling was too wonderful for words. For a moment, Han Yunxi forgot about the situation they were in. She also forgot that the shattered pieces on the ground were about to reveal the answer. "Your Highness, you must not know how handsome you look when you're serious." Gu Qixia stared at the sight as his eyes turned cold. He refused to believe that Long Fei could remain so calm and collected at a time like this. Long Feiyi was indeed able to keep his composure. After Han Yunxi's finger had stopped bleeding, he personally picked up the shattered pieces. Every time he picked up a piece, he would turn it upside down. Without exception, the insides of these shattered pieces were all black. Soon, all the shattered pieces were on the table. They were all black. Gu Qixia was no longer in the mood to take things slowly. He took out another porcelain bottle of the same size and poured 80% of the antidote into it. He gently shook it and poured out the antidote. He personally shattered the bottle and picked up the shattered pieces one by one. This time, however, the shattered pieces were. Chapter 466. What color were the shards that Gu Qixia picked up? Were they both black and white? No, these shards were actually still white. They were the original color of the porcelain bottle and had not changed in the slightest. The two piles of shards were placed next to each other on the tea table. The contrast between the two piles of shards, one black and one white, was extremely obvious. This was irrefutable evidence that no one could ignore. This irrefutable evidence proved that only a full bottle could cause the porcelain bottle to change color. An 80% full bottle would not be able to do so. On the other hand, the porcelain bottle that Han Yunxi had brought over was completely black. Therefore, the antidote that Long Fei had taken from Gu Qixia was indeed a full bottle. Han Yunxi and Long Fei were both shocked. The two of them looked at each other with different expressions. Han Yunxi had a serious expression while Long Fei remained expressionless. Gu Qixia looked at them with admiration. However, admiration was one thing. This time, he had spent so much effort to come up with such an ingenious plan. Naturally, he would not let Long Fei get away with it. "Little girl, we only have 50% of the antidote left. That's why I used half of the antidote as an experiment and simulated two situations, a full bottle and an 80% full bottle. Only a full bottle would be able to cause the porcelain bottle to turn black. An 80% full bottle would not be able to do so. Are you satisfied with this evidence? Gu Qi patiently asked. Han Yunxi stared at the shards without saying a word. Gu Qi was very smart. He was not in a hurry to point the finger at Long Feiyi. Instead, he provoked Han Yunxi. He sneered, "Qin Wangfei, you're still a member of the circle. For a mere 10% of the antidote, you came all the way here to trick me. You're really going all out, aren't you?" Han Yunxi immediately looked up at him. She was clearly a little angry.
What?
The evidence is irrefutable and you still want to argue? How are you going to argue? Fortunately, I was careful. Otherwise, I don't know how badly I would have been slandered by you too. TSK, this world is really dangerous. Gu Qi sighed. Looking at Han Yunxi's solemn little face, Long Feiyi, who was always calm, finally showed a worried expression. He knew very well that he should defend himself against Gu Qi's provocation, but how was he supposed to defend himself? Gu Qi's trap was too professional. Even though he had learned a lot about the antidote from Medicine City's Elder Wang, he still couldn't guard against a genius pharmacist like Gu Qi. He hadn't underestimated Gu Qi's professionalism, but he'd underestimated Gu Qi's motives. He had a hunch that Gu Qi had mixed things up and left a trick up his sleeve to lure Han Yunxi over. Princess Consort, say something. Was it you who tricked me, or was it me who tricked you? What kind of debt are you here to collect? Gu Qi's tone was so exaggerated that anyone who heard it would have the urge to beat him up. Long Feiyi couldn't hold himself back from provoking Han Yunxi like this. Just as he was about to speak up, Han Yunxi angrily said, "Gu Qi, have you had enough? Some people are shameless, and you're one of those shameless people." Gu Qi was stunned. This little girl was still scolding him? The evidence was right in front of them, yet she still wasn't going to question Long Feiyi? Long Feiyi was also surprised. He should have been nervous, but for some reason, a faint smile appeared on his face. Just as Gu Qi was about to argue his case, Han Yunxi was filled with righteous indignation. She picked up the rest of the fake powder and threw it at Gu Qi. Gu Qi, this is what you call irrefutable evidence. What do you mean by I tricked you? You make it sound like you've never tricked anyone before. Let's talk about whether the bottle is full or not later. First, you'd better explain yourself. The powder covered Gu Qi's black mask and even stuck to his long eyelashes. He should have been angry, but he couldn't bring himself to be angry when he saw this little girl's furious expression. He had meticulously set up this trap and waited for half a year, so he didn't mind taking a step back. He reached out and flicked his eyelashes. His hand was bony and his skin was dark, making him look extremely terrifying. However, his every movement was filled with a sense of elegance that couldn't be ignored. He flicked the powder off his eyelashes, then slowly brushed the powder off his black mask. Only then did he speak. "My lord, I dare to lie." "That's right, my lord. I did adulterate it. What do you think?" His tone was both arrogant and arrogant, making Han Yunxi very uncomfortable. She sneered, "You're speaking so generously. If I didn't know better, I would have thought that you were admitting it willingly." Not long ago, the two of them had engaged in an extremely calculative debate. She had spent a lot of effort to prove that he was the one who had mixed the fake powder and that she and Long Feiyi had not purposely added it. Gu Qi almost choked on his own saliva. Could this little girl's tongue be any sharper? "What exactly do you want?" Gu Qi asked. "I'll compensate you 10 times if it's fake." Han Yunxi had already thought of this. Gu Qi was very generous. I can even compensate you 100 times if it's fake, but I must find out exactly how much of it I've faked. If I haven't done it, my lord won't admit it." His words once again brought the topic back to the topic of quantity. According to the quantity of serpent fruit, the antidote they had concocted was only 60%. Long Feiyi had only received 40%, and the rest was all adulterated powder. Gu Qixia had taken out 10%, and the remaining 10% was still missing. If Gu Qixia had hidden this 10%, then he would have to compensate Han Yunqi 20%. If the 20% was fake, then he would have to compensate her 10%, which was equivalent to 2 full bottles of the antidote. If Long Fei Yi had hidden this 10%, then Gu Qixia would only have to compensate Han Yunqi 10%. If the 10% was fake, then he would have to compensate her 10%, which was equivalent to 2 full bottles of the antidote. The antidote for broomcorn millet poison was no ordinary item. Now that it was practically impossible to find the 3 missing ingredients, the compensation was no small matter. Gu Qixia deliberately glanced at Long Fei Yi and smiled. "Isn't that right, Your Highness Duke of Qin?" At this time, Han Yunqi looked at Long Fei Yi again. Her elegant face was as serious as when she was treating a poison, or perhaps even more so. This wasn't the first time Long Fei Yi had found himself unable to see through this woman's eyes, but this was the first time he had been completely unable to see through her. Why is Han Yunqi looking at me like this? What is she thinking at this moment? Long Fei Yi looked calm, but his fingers tapping on the table betrayed him. This was the first time in his life that he felt uncomfortable under a woman's gaze. Actually, Long Fei Yi needed to refute Gu Qixia right now, but how was he supposed to do so? Gu Qixia was right. The evidence was irrefutable. He could admit that he had taken a full bottle of antidote, but how was he supposed to explain where the remaining 20% had gone? This woman in front of him was no fool. Moreover, after the commotion caused by Mu Linger on the way here, anyone would be able to link it to Mute Granny's incident. After all, there was only one antidote for broomcorn millet poison, and that was the antidote. Long Fei Yi remained silent while Han Yunqi looked at him with a solemn expression. The atmosphere between the two of them gradually became tense. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, please say something." Gu Qixia's please seemed polite, but he was actually pressing him. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, you've been in a hurry to find the antidote for broomcorn millet poison. You originally gave me a year's time limit, but later reduced it to half a year. I'm sure you're also in a hurry to detoxify the poison and save someone, right? Please don't bite me after saving someone. I've helped you find the antidote and concocted the medicine for you. Even if I haven't done anything, I've still worked hard, don't you think?" Han Yunqi slowly knitted her brows when she heard this. Long Fei Yi's brows furrowed even tighter when he saw Han Yunqi's complicated gaze. Only the heavens knew what kind of perilous waves were surging in his heart beneath his cold exterior. Your Highness Duke of Qin, please say something." "I really did give you a full bottle, so please hurry up and say something. Don't let esteemed Wang Fei misunderstand. I can't afford to compensate you." Gu Qixia pretended to be on the verge of tears as he taunted. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi looked at each other in silence. Gu Qixia was very fond of the current atmosphere. He sneered, "Stop putting on an act, you husband and wife. You know best how much medicine you have in your hands. In any case, I've only kept one portion for myself. If it's fake, I'll pay you 10 times the price. As for the rest, I won't admit it." Unexpectedly, Han Yunqi's brows suddenly relaxed, and she flashed a sly smile at Long Fei Yi. She's figured it out. She'd been looking at Long Fei Yi the entire time, trying very hard to find a flaw in his iron mountain like a mountain. She never doubted Long Fei Yi at all. How could Long Fei Yi lie to her on this matter? She firmly believed that Gu Qixia had only given her 80% of the medicine, so she'd been stubbornly thinking of a way to refute him and prove that there were flaws in his evidence. She'd finally figured it out. "Gu Qixia, neither this princess consort nor his highness has admitted that these things are evidence. What are you so anxious about?" Han Yunqi said coldly. Long Fei Yi was very surprised. What is this woman trying to say? Gu Qixia sucked in a breath of cold air. Most people refuse to shed tears until they see the coffin, but this girl doesn't even know the difference between life and death. If these aren't evidence, then what are they? Han Yunqi, even if you want to cheat, you shouldn't act like this, right? Gu Qixia's tone had also turned cold. Only the heavens know if the vase you gave His Highness was originally black or not. You're even willing to do something like adulterating the vase. You're not a trustworthy person to begin with, so what else can't you do? Han Yunxi raised her brows and retorted. Long Fei Yi almost laughed out loud when he heard this, but Gu Qixia almost spat out a mouthful of blood.
Han Yunxi, you. Me? What about me?
How can you prove that the vase you gave me was originally white? How can you prove that these black stains weren't originally there?
Han Yunxi continued to ask.
Gu Qixia was really angry. This woman. What is this woman's brain made of? How is she so smart? She can even think of this flaw. I've thought about this for so long, but I didn't even consider this point. Why doesn't this damned girl become a lawyer? However, Gu Qixia quickly calmed down and said confidently, time. Han Yunxi, time can prove it. The degree of damage is related to time. If you don't believe me, we can take the vase and test it again. There's definitely a difference between the original black vase and the one that was dyed black after being filled with medicine. Gu Qixia explained seriously. Han Yunxi laughed disdainfully. Gu Qixia, forget it. You were the one who provided the vase, so who knows if you tampered with it or not. Gu Qixia really wanted to vomit blood. I've been wronged. Things have already gotten to this point. So how can Han Yunxi not suspect Long Fei Yi? Must she really suspect him? Damned girl. Since you're saying this, I have nothing else to say. In any case, I won't admit it. I just won't admit it. Gu Qixia said angrily. It's not up to you to admit it. Han Yunxi's tone became unyielding. Chapter 467. Han Yunxi looked at Gu Qixia coldly as she adopted a stance that wouldn't budge an inch. Gu Qixia narrowed his eyes dangerously as he stared back at her. It was as if a battle was about to break out between the two of them. Han Yunxi, I respected you for being a reasonable and reliable person, but I didn't expect you to be no different from any other woman. You're truly disappointing. Gu Qixia snorted coldly. How do you expect me to prove something that I can't prove? Han Yunxi retorted coldly. So, you also know that you can't prove anything, Gu Qixia sneered. If you can't prove anything, then let's fight. If you win, then we'll take it that you only cheated us out of 10% of the antidote. If you lose, then you'll have to compensate us with 20%. Han Yunxi looked angry on the surface, but she was actually very calm and astute on the inside. She was certain that Gu Qixia had taken 10% of the antidote, so all she could think about was compensation. She wanted to get the best compensation possible. Gu Qixia didn't mind compensating them. His only goal was to find out where the 10% of the antidote had gone. Gu Qixia almost vomited blood when he heard Han Yunxi's words. She clearly knew that he couldn't beat Long Fei Yi, but she still wanted to fight him. Han Yunxi, you shameless scoundrel. Gu Qixia cursed angrily. If you don't fight, then it proves that you're guilty. Han Yunxi immediately retorted. Gu Qixia's mood soured when he heard this. You don't want to know where the 10% of the antidote went? The usually calm Gu Qixia was truly enraged at this moment. Long Fei Yi, who had not been questioned, remained calm throughout, taking in Gu Qixia's every word and action. If he had been suspicious before, then he was now certain that Gu Qixia had an ulterior motive for deliberately emphasizing where the 10% of the antidote had gone. The black shadow that had barged into the hidden pavilion to kidnap Mute Granny surfaced in Long Fei Yi's mind once again. He silently sized up Gu Qixia, his gaze as deep as the sea, unfathomable. Then you'll be the one who swallowed the medicine. You don't need to talk nonsense with me. Just tell me, are you going to compensate or not? Han Yunxi asked coldly. Gu Qixia didn't hesitate at all.
No.
Even if I die, I won't compensate you. Han Yunxi ignored him and looked at Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi didn't like to talk nonsense even more than Han Yunxi. He directly drew his sword, and the sword chi broke the silence of the night. Despite having lost twice to Long Fei Yi, Gu Qixia wasn't afraid at all. He held his head high and looked death in the eye. I won't regret even if I die. Han Yunxi's heart skipped a beat. She knew that Gu Qixia had been defeated twice by Long Fei Yi's sword. She had thought that Gu Qixia would be afraid, but she hadn't expected him to be so stubborn. Although she was shocked, Han Yunxi didn't back down. She sneered. This princess consort doesn't believe that there's such a thing as going back on one's words. At this moment, the high and mighty Han Yunxi was like a domineering and iron-blooded queen. Even Long Feiyi seemed to be obeying her orders. As soon as she finished speaking, Long Feiyi made his move. He raised his sword and stabbed it at Gu Qixia. Han Yunxi waited. She waited for Gu Qixia to stop, beg for mercy, and admit defeat. Someone like Gu Qixia was definitely a coward who was afraid of death. His bearing and strength of character had nothing to do with him. This was a game, a negotiation, and even a business deal. Both sides were putting on an act, and only the one who could last until the end would win. Han Yunxi thought to herself as Long Feiyi's sword approached Gu Qixia. Long Feiyi was just like her, waiting for Gu Qixia to stop. The last 2 times, Gu Qixia had given in. This guy was the classic example of someone who wouldn't give up until he saw the coffin. However, this time, Gu Qixia didn't dodge, nor did he shout for the sword to stop. He just stood there, his eyes cold and stubborn as he stared straight at Han Yunxi. This guy, why isn't he dodging? Han Yunxi was puzzled. She couldn't help but ask, "Do you admit defeat?" Unexpectedly, Gu Qixia didn't even answer her. Instead, he leaned forward and used his black robes to block the sword. Han Yunxi was shocked. Long Feiyi was also very surprised. However, Gu Qixia finally opened his mouth. He was as stubborn as a child as he said word by word, "I didn't do it, so I won't admit defeat." Han Yunxi was puzzled. He won't admit defeat? Then where did the 10% of the antidote go? It couldn't have been Long Feiyi who took it, right? Why would Long Feiyi take that 10% of the antidote for no reason? Although the antidote for broomcorn millet poison was expensive, it was completely useless if it wasn't used to cure the poison. For some reason, Mu Ling Er's angry eyes and her accusatory words suddenly appeared in Han Yunxi's mind. Han Yunxi shuddered at the thought and stopped abruptly. Heavens, what was she thinking? How could she suspect Long Feiyi? What reason did Long Feiyi have to imprison Mute Granny? Long Feiyi had even less reason to hide her identity from her. Knowing her identity would not only help her guard against some unknown dangers, but it might even help Long Feiyi a lot. The orphan of Western Qin's imperial family had considerable influence. As a descendant of the poison sect, she would definitely be able to control some of the sect's resources. This would only benefit Long Feiyi. Long Feiyi would definitely tell her as soon as he had any news. Besides Long Feiyi, Gu Qixia was the only other person who had come into contact with the antidote. There was no third party. If it wasn't Long Feiyi, then it had to be Gu Qixia. Han Yunxi had no choice but to choose between Long Feiyi and Gu Qixia. Han Yunxi would only choose Long Feiyi. You're pretending. Keep pretending. You're even capable of adulterating the antidote. You still have. Before Han Yunxi could finish, Gu Qixia grabbed Long Feiyi's sword and stabbed it into his shoulder. Blood immediately soaked his black robes and dripped to the ground. Master. The old steward cried out and tried to stop him, but Gu Qixia shoved him aside. He glared at Han Yunxi and roared, "This old man already said that I won't admit to anything if I didn't do it." Faced with such a gaze, Han Yunxi wanted to confidently kick him back, but in the end, her heart grew flustered and she subconsciously avoided him. She had always been firm in dealing with matters she had set her mind on. Why was she so afraid to look Gu Qixia in the eye this time? Could it be that she had wavered? Han Yunxi furrowed her brows and looked at Long Feiyi. Long Feiyi's heart skipped a beat, but he was never one to drag his feet or hesitate. He was terrifyingly decisive. He didn't look at Han Yunxi. Instead, a cold light flashed in his eyes as he pulled out his sword and stabbed it towards Gu Qixia's heart. This sword technique and strength were exactly the same as the one he'd used to stab the black-robed man in the heart. If Gu Qixia died, everything would be over. If Gu Qixia didn't die, he would have discovered a secret. Han Yunxi was shocked. She didn't expect Long Feiyi to be so ruthless. She couldn't regain her senses for a moment. However, Guqi Sha was still staring at her, completely unfazed by Long Fei Ye's sword. Just like that, the blade of the sword closed in and stabbed towards Guqi Sha. At the same time, Guqi Sha abruptly retreated a large step to avoid Long Fei's sword by a hair's breadth. Yes, he avoided it. Han Yunxi's taut nerves immediately relaxed. She couldn't help but exhale, secretly rejoicing. However, she soon realized that something was wrong. What was she rejoicing about? Rejoicing my ass. Guqi Sha retreated and said that he wouldn't admit to anything even if he died. In the end, he still managed to avoid the sword that was aimed at his heart. Although a piercing wound would cause a lot of blood, it wouldn't kill him. She was almost fooled by this despicable and cunning bastard. Long Fei smiled coldly before withdrawing his sword and wiping off the bloodstains. Han Yunxi smiled disdainfully.
What?
Is this what you meant by not admitting to anything even if you die? Guqi Sha stared at them for a long time without saying a word. No one knew what he was thinking. Long Fei Yi slowly wiped his sword clean, then used the same trick again. He pointed the sword at Guqi Sha's heart. This prince will ask you one last time. Do you admit to anything or not? Yes. Guqi Sha's attitude took a 180-degree turn. He reached out to remove Long Fei's sword and pressed it against his shoulder blade. Fresh blood stained his hand, staining his bony fingers red. Amidst the horror, there was a hint of desolation. Han Yunxi's doubts were dispelled just like that. Where's the medicines? Han Yunxi asked. I sold it a long time ago. Guqi Sha replied coldly. Han Yunxi was shocked. Who bought it? The buyer must be someone who needed the antidote for broomcorn millet poison. Perhaps Mute Granny really wasn't dead. Guqi Sha glanced at Long Fei Yi and snorted. I don't know. His price made me very happy. I don't care if he's a human or a dog. A cold glint flashed across Long Fei Yi's eyes, but he didn't say anything. Han Yunxi, on the other hand, was anxious. Guqi Sha, tell me who bought it. We can discuss compensation. How about it? Would you believe me if I made it up? Guqi Sha asked seriously. Han Yunxi was furious, but Guqi Sha suddenly asked, would you believe me if I said it was the Duke of Qin who bought it? Han Yunxi ignored him and said coldly, we'll compensate you 10 times if you're lying. You have to pay us 20%, which is 2 bottles of antidote. Guqi Sha sat down and said, I don't have the antidote to compensate you. Just tell me how much money you want. TSK, what a rich and overbearing guy. He actually dares to talk about money in front of the Duke of Qin. Han Yunxi laughed. Lord Pillfiend, how much money do you think it'll take to buy 2 bottles of antidote for broomcorn millet poison? That's 2 portions of serpent fruit, bear chuan, and panoptic red lotus. These things couldn't be bought even if one had the money, and now it was even more so. Then what do you want? Guqi Sha looked cold, but he was actually disappointed and weak. Han Yunxi was waiting for him to say this. She quickly replied, I'll compensate you with medicine. What do you mean? Guqi Sha asked indifferently, feeling even more powerless. Use your medicine Ghost Valley's antidotes as compensation. Bear chuan, panoptic red lotus, and serpent fruit are worth 20 times their original value. That's at least. As Han Yunxi spoke, her eyes swiveled before she added, for better or worse, it should be worth your Pillfiend Valley, right?
Cough.
Cough, cough. The old steward suddenly started coughing violently, obviously choking on his own saliva. This princess consort wasn't asking for an exorbitant price. She was asking for an exorbitant price with 20 lions. No matter how valuable the panoptic red lotus, serpent fruit, and bear chuan were, they definitely couldn't compare to Medicine Ghost Valley. What kind of joke was this woman playing? Chapter 468. The herbs in the Medicine Ghost Valley were not your average herbs. Every single one of them was of high quality. Furthermore, Pillfiend had chosen this valley because of its climate and soil, which were very suitable for growing herbs. Therefore, the value of the Medicine Ghost Valley was far more valuable than the sum of all the herbs here. Aside from Pill Fiend himself, there was no one else in this world who could estimate the value of the Medicine Ghost Valley. Forget about the old steward. Even Long Fei was shocked by Han Yunqi's actions. He knew that this woman had been eyeing the Medicine Ghost Valley for a long time and that she would never give up on this opportunity. He thought that she would take it one step at a time. However, he never thought that she would be so ruthless. She actually wanted to take over the entire Medicine Ghost Valley in one go. Although Long Fei didn't want to admit it, he felt that his woman wasn't here to collect a debt, but to rob him. Ruthless and barbaric, he liked it. Gu Qisha looked at Han Yunqi suspiciously. What did you say? This princess wants the entire Medicine Ghost Valley. Otherwise, this matter won't end here. All right, Han Yunqi admitted that she was here to be a robber. She had wanted to take over the Medicine Ghost Valley for a long time, but she lacked a reason and an opportunity. Now, she could finally say it out loud. There was a saying that went, "Stealing a book is not stealing." However, Han Yunqi didn't think that stealing medicine was stealing. If she took over the entire Medicine Ghost Valley, how many people could she save? Even if she had to bear the infamy of being a robber, she would accept it. If Gu Qisha wasn't convinced, then they could fight again. You want the Medicine Ghost Valley? Gu Qisha muttered to himself. The room was silent. Gu Qisha looked as if he was about to explode at any moment and curse Han Yunqi for going too far. However, to everyone's surprise, Gu Qisha's originally dim eyes slowly lit up. He looked at Han Yunqi, and as he stared, he suddenly smiled. You want Medicine Ghost Valley? He asked again. Han Yunqi raised her chin and looked at him openly. Yes. Han Yunqi seemed to take it for granted and refused to budge an inch, but in fact, she was pretending. It wasn't her first time in the Medicine Ghost Valley. She knew how many precious medicinal herbs there were in the Medicine Ghost Valley. Although she hadn't explored all of them, the detoxification system had already detected a lot of them. The medicinal herbs in this valley were all of high quality. Moreover, there were at least thousands of precious medicinal herbs and hundreds of unique medicinal herbs. The value of the Medicine Ghost Valley was far beyond the value of the bracelet on her wrist. It was truly immeasurable. Indeed, she had intentionally raised the price by raising the price so that Gu Qisha could bargain with her. Han Yunqi, do you really think I'm that easy to bully? Gu Qisha's expression was cold, but there was no real hostility in his eyes. Your Excellency Pill Fiend, you bullied us first. We are much easier to bully than you, Han Yunqi said with a smile. Do you know how many graded medicinal herbs there are in the Medicine Ghost Valley? How many unique medicinal herbs are there? Gu Qisha asked again. The so-called graded herbs were those that had been appraised by Medicine City and given a certain level of quality. There were a total of 10 grades, from the 1st to the 10th. The higher the grade, the higher the value. As for the unique herbs, as their name implied, there was only one of them in the world. Once used, there would be no more. I don't know, Han Yunqi said calmly. I don't want Medicine Ghost Valley either. If you give me 2 bottles as compensation right now, I'll leave immediately. Well, when a woman acts shamelessly, it's 100 times scarier than when she's acting coquettishly. Long Fei looked at Han Yunqi's helpless and innocent expression and couldn't help but smile dotingly. He loved this naughty side of her the most. The doting look in Gu Qisha's eyes was also thick, but he hid it very well and suppressed it with anger. He said, It's fine if you don't know. Let's find Medicine City's Council of Elders and have them evaluate whether or not the Panoptic Red Lotus, Serpent Fruit, and Bear Chuan are worth a Medicine Ghost Valley. Medicine City's Council of Elders was the combined power of the Wang, Mu, and Xie clans. The Wang clan would naturally stand on their side, but it was hard to say what the Mu and Xie clans would do. Due to the conflict between Medical City and Gu Qisha, they probably wouldn't stand on Gu Qisha's side, but they definitely wouldn't side with them either. Han Yunqi wasn't stupid enough to cause trouble for herself. The Medicine Ghost Valley's value is easy to estimate, but how do you estimate the losses you've caused us? Han Yunqi retorted. Gu Qixia sighed heavily, seemingly helpless. He didn't answer. The old steward next to him was suspicious. His master had always been eloquent and sharp-tongued, so why was he so silent in the face of such a big matter? This didn't seem like his personality at all. With his personality, how could he remain silent? He would have laughed at Han Yunxi a long time ago. The old steward felt that his master was acting strangely, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Meanwhile, Long Feiyi had been scrutinizing Gu Qixia all this time. Lord Pillfiend, if you don't say anything, then we'll settle it like this? Han Yunxi pressed on. She wasn't afraid of Gu Qixia bargaining, as long as he didn't say anything. How about this? I'll give you 20 herbs. You can choose whatever you want as long as the Medicine Ghost Valley has them. Gu Qixia finally laid out his conditions. Han Yunxi shook her head. 50 herbs, no higher, Gu Qixia said. Han Yunxi shook her head again with a faint smile. Then what do you want? Gu Qixia looked gloomy. I want the entire valley. Han Yunxi refused to budge. Gu Qixia snorted disdainfully. Impossible. So, we can't come to an agreement? You're not going to admit it in the end? Han Yunxi sighed. Her words were full of threats. He had already tasted the consequences of going back on his word. Gu Qixia glanced at Long Feiyi's sword and finally gave in. I'll grant you whatever you want, okay? He would grant Han Yunxi whatever she wanted. That was what it meant by granting her whatever she wanted. You can't. Han Yunxi still refused. In negotiations, once you give in, you'll have to give in step by step. Gu Qixia huffed. I'll also grant all the requests of those people outside, okay? Han Yunxi still shook her head. I'll grant all the requests of whoever comes, okay? Gu Qixia asked angrily. The old steward thought that Qin Wangfei should agree now. She had just stood up for those people and wanted the Medicine Ghost Valley, so she must be trying to save someone. However, Han Yunxi still shook her head. Gu Qixia stopped talking and glared at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi finally spoke. Even if I don't have the entire Medicine Ghost Valley, I'll at least have half of the Medicine Ghost Valley. You'll be in charge of growing the medicine, and I'll be in charge of selling it. How does that sound? Selling medicine? This woman, who had just righteously accused Gu Qixia of leaving people in the lurch, actually wanted to sell medicine? Forget about the old steward and Gu Qixia. Even Long Feiyi didn't know what to say about her. Jinjin originally thought that she was a bodhisattva, kind and righteous person who couldn't be any better. Jinjin originally thought that the first thing she would do after taking over the Medicine Ghost Valley would be to deliver the medicine, but she actually said that she wanted to sell it. Gu Qixia's interest was piqued. Esteemed Wang Fei, are you saying that you plan to stay here permanently? As soon as Han Yunxi mentioned her conditions, Gu Qixia thought of this point. It was also this thought that caused his dim eyes to gradually brighten. Even though he hadn't been able to expose Long Feiyi's secret stash of the antidote after all this time, at least he had gained something. He liked this lass, so if she could stay in the Medicine Ghost Valley for a long time and hand over her authority to only grow medicine for him, he wouldn't even have to think about it. He would be more than happy to do so. He was only pretending to bargain because he didn't want this lass and Long Feiyi to get suspicious. Stay here permanently? Han Yunxi hadn't even considered this question, but Long Feiyi heard it clearly and remembered it in his heart, but he didn't say anything. Gu Qixia, this condition is already this Wang Fei's bottom line. You should consider it, Han Yunxi said as she sat down to drink her tea. This tea was quite delicious. She drank 3 cups in a row and felt that this tea was very familiar. However, she couldn't tell what kind of tea it was. Gu Qixia also sat down and pretended to be deep in thought. He covered his wound with one hand and skillfully changed the tea leaves with the other before pouring the first cup for Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi didn't hold back and casually picked up the cup to drink. And this tea really is quite good. It's fragrant, bright, and pure. Esteemed Wang Fei, Gu Qixia said earnestly. Han Yunxi remained indifferent. She wanted to see what other tricks he had up his sleeve. This condition of yours. Not only do you want the Medicine Ghost Valley, but you also want me. Actually, what Gu Qixia really wanted to say was, Lass, if you want the medicine Ghost Valley, I'll give it to you. If you want me, I'll give it to you too. However, he knew that Long Fei Yi would definitely make a move the moment he said those words, so this matter couldn't be discussed. He endured it and continued with a smile. You want the medicine Ghost Valley's medicine, and you want me to grow it. How is this just half of the medicine Ghost Valley? It's clearly, haha, esteemed Wang Fei, if you want to negotiate, you should show some sincerity. As soon as Gu Qixia said those words, Han Yunxi knew that she had a chance. She pretended to think for a while before saying, I'll give you half of the profits from selling the medicine, and I'll also pay you for growing the medicine. This can be considered a partnership between the two of us. There's no need to discuss anything else. Gu Qixia hesitated, but Han Yunxi quickly knocked on the table and urged, My patience is limited.
All right.
This lord will add one last condition. Without my permission, you're not allowed to sell the medicine in this courtyard. Gu Qixia said seriously.
Fine.
Han Yunxi was very decisive. She took the authority and left the rest to be discussed later. Actually, she was quite afraid that Gu Qixia would go back on his word. If this guy went back on his word and they couldn't come to an agreement, they would really have to resort to force to kill him or force him to leave. They would be the ones to suffer the most losses. How long could the medicine Ghost Valley last without His Excellency Pill Fiend? No matter how many medicine they had, they would run out sooner or later. Moreover, most of the medicine in the medicine Ghost Valley depended on Gu Qixia to grow, so outsiders wouldn't be able to keep them alive. Gu Qixia, then it's a deal. If you go back on your word. Before Han Yunxi could finish speaking, Gu Qixia laughed. Esteemed Wang Fei, do you think this lowly person has the ability to go back on his word? This guy, one moment he was an adult, the next he was a lowly person. His mouth was full of ridicule, and Han Yunxi felt very uncomfortable listening to him. However, she didn't mind. After all, she had obtained Pill Fiend's authority, so she would have plenty of opportunities to deal with this guy in the future. The first thing she needed to do now was to deal with the large group of people kneeling outside. Steward, send someone out to register all the medicine that those people outside need. Find them all and sell them at a price. Han Yunxi ordered. The old steward was dumbfounded. He hadn't even recovered from the outcome of the negotiations, so he didn't expect to receive an order to sell medicines so quickly. Is the medicine Ghost Valley really going to undergo a great change? The old steward hesitantly looked at Gu Qixia. Gu Qixia unhappily said, What are you looking at? Do you want me to do it myself? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.